redhead.
Yeah.
Do you find it unusual that everybody is like just kowtowing to everything that he says? Like half of the agencies, everything. Nobody is like,
Yeah.
speaking.
Oh, some federal workers are speaking out, which is good. Democracy Now! Had some woman from the Veterans Administration,
Who's getting backlash from the
fighting
courts
them.
and even the Supreme Court said he's
Yeah,
got to give out the money. But the thing that seemed to get lost in the media is that the judge said he's got to release the money for services already delivered.
Rendered.
Like they hired some contractor to build a latrine. He built the latrine. Now you got to pay him. That's what I think the judge, the federal judge, the lower court judge required, that they release the funds for services already delivered.
Oh, that's just a contract.
And, pay your bills.
If you can go back to the Federalist Papers, the founders were very concerned with making, it was all about private property and enforcing contract law. If you look at the original Constitution, they talk about Hamilton and Madison. They talk about it explicitly because again, it was a constitution to protect private property, which is
private property and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
but I mean, I think it's
much more important than human life. I mean, that's literally what they said, because of course they were okay with enslaving people at the same time. So
the thing with Musk is,
they always read off these list of boondoggle.
Right.
I sent $400 million to have a circus in Kuwait, whatever it is. All this silly pork barrel stuff, which is true.
Even the stuff
the thing I've been seeing in the media is people, what do you call the people who tell the story? What do you call somebody who tells, stands to witness to tell you the underground truth, what's really happening? I forget what you call
this whistleblower.
Yeah, whistleblower. Isn't that a strange term? A whistleblower. That's a strange term for that.
Oh, it's like muckraker,
Yeah, but it's like you think a whistleblower is a guy directing traffic. But anyhow.
Right. Well, again, it's a colloquial.
So the whistleblowers will say a lot of these nonprofits and through USAID and other nonprofits and the State Department, they give it to this guy, they give it to that guy, they give it to the other guy, and the CIA uses it to set up different procedures and stuff. A lot of it goes to the CIA. Whatever. There is a thing on it. I think we went over it last time, Article 2 and Article 3, but it's in Article 1 that says the funds allocated by the House of Representatives have to be reported transparent so that the public knows what the money was spent on. And that's what has not been happening. That's more or less trying to do now.
So the black budget is unconstitutional, hiding the money that goes to the CIA. That's
you're talking about like the Pentagon black budget.
We should know again every penny that's going to the CIA or the DOD. When of course they don't even, the Department of Defense.
That's right.
That report years ago that that they use these accounting tricks that added up to $21 trillion, which was the entire U.S. GDP that year. Back in
it's mostly the military and the CIA and FBI.
In theory, we over budgeted
like that.
Department of Defense for essentially the entire country. And probably not quite that bad, but again, there are definitely trillions of dollars that have just disappeared over the decades.
We never know where the money goes.
Of course,
We don't know where it goes to Pacifica, and we don't know where it goes to the Covenant.
No.
It don't go to us, that's for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't go to us. So
it go away from us. If he puts anything on with the social and with all those, thing, because see, he doesn't know, they don't know poor people. They don't know like
No.
people that have nothing, that are homeless. He don't know those people. He's never met them.
Of course.
He wouldn't know what they look like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and he doesn't know his own economic policies. I don't know if we have time. I got a good clip from Richard Wolff. He's
Oh,
talking about the Trump recession already. He's all these crazy, the tariffs and everything else that he's doing. It's already, the Fed, Federal Reserve is already saying they're predicting a recession this for the first quarter or now, that
well,
we're
it's
gonna
an
economy
inflation
to drop
already.
2%. This this just the next 3 months.
Richard Wolff tells it like it is.
Now again, the tariffs. I mean, that's before you get into balance of payments stuff. But it's yeah, because Trump acts like oh, and now he's going to add more tariffs because of what Mexico and Canada and China are doing. It's I was joking to a friend. Well, you're Joe. You might be old enough. You were around for this. The Smoot-Hawley tariffs in the '30s that helped cause the Depression. That could be where we're going. That again, tariffs pile on top of tariffs until the
maybe we'll look forward to look back and say, gee, I remember the times weren't so bad during the last Depression. I wish we could at least stand in line somewhere and not freeze to death.
Well, at least we'll have unemployment insurance now, or until that runs out.
Well, not everybody's making money like a movie stars and basketball players, that's for sure.
Ken,
hedge funds.
You're in the socialist paradise of California, right? So
yeah, well, it's raining today, which is like a holiday. In LA, when it rains, it's like
Ken,
everybody runs out and says, "Oh, thank you."
We're getting an echo from you. I think it might be.
Oh, you're getting an echo, huh?
Well, you just sound weird compared to before. Your voice is coming out, like an echo.
Oh, well, I'll stop talking. That's what I can do. I just won't say much. How about, do you have something you want to show?
You want, yeah, again.
I have,
or you don't want to play part of the speech, or want to talk about it?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Let me, where they kick out Representative Green.
Oh,
that was so good. Why didn't more of them get up and
well, some of them did get out, but I don't think they want to be arrested. Some had something they said written on the back of their shirts and walked out. Yeah, but
well, there's an issue here. I have a question, because let's say it's mostly progressives and the left that says, "Get out in the street. We gotta hit the streets. We gotta resist. We gotta protest." I got emails saying, we're going to protest in front of everything that says Trump and everything that says Tesla. We got to go protest.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere you're getting towards what's called, excuse me for saying this, mob rule. Mob rule. Hang the guy, hang the guy. Oh, somebody else is joining us. Let's see. It's, I don't know who that is.
Who? Jim sent it out to him.
Yeah, he sent it out to a few people. So this is, you know this person? Ida.
Oh, she's been on some of Jim's other.
Yeah, she's got a picture of the family. Joan, you gotta set the camera up so we can see your smile.
You don't want to see my face, is awful.
Oh, come on. Well, then.
My computer is like, the screen is falling off from the keyboard and I can't use it.
Okay. All right. I don't care.
I'm in my office because I don't have a place to live. Okay. So I got a lot of issues.
Oh, all right. That's pretty good. That's pretty good looking tent you're in there. Okay. Hello. Is that Atia or Ita?
Itai.
Itai. Okay.
Yeah, I think of my country is Thailand.
Oh, Thailand. I was just over there. Just
Yeah, I was joking that my
December.
country is Thailand. No, it's just how to pronounce my name. Although I hear Bangkok is a wonderful city.
Bangkok.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. It's all right.
I'm a friend of Jim. He sent me a link to this.
Yes, he sent you a link. So we're talking about right now we're talking about General Trump's performance last night. You know, the one-man show. It's a one-man show.
We have to stop saying his name. I have not said his name once.
I totally agree.
Say his name.
Totally agree. Totally agree. He's like the character. I think there was a character in one of those fantasy movies. Like, the guy with the magic. The kids go to the magic thing. Right. You know, Harry Potter. And there's the villain. And they don't mention his name. It's a guy who didn't have a nose or something. Don't mention his name. He's the villain. So I agree with you. It's silly to just keep talking about personalities.
But I thought that we should be out on the streets protesting and to get our voices heard. But I think we got to be more strategic about how we're going to take over the government, because we got to take over the government.
Well, you already got human beings up there, you know. We got to get something better than human beings. So, Alex, Ataya, are you going to have to help me on that? I'm not familiar. It sounds like
Thai,
like a tie, but with the.
As I said,
like
think of my country is Thailand.
Yeah, like
Thai.
And now, were you joking me? Is that Thailand or is that something else?
No, just to understand how to pronounce my name.
Okay, a Thai. Okay, I see, like Thailand. And here's Aaron Reyes is joining us. So a few people are joining us. So let me put up this little thing I got, and then Alex will go to you after that. Let me see what I got here. It's did I get to the right one? No, I didn't get the right one. So let me go back and get the right one. Where's the right one that I just sent? There it is. And here's the right buttons.
Hey, Ken?
Yes. Hi, Aaron.
This is Aaron. Hi. I sent you an email earlier in the week. I don't know if you got it.
Oh, I've been getting emails from you on.
No. I sent an email that I said I'm on the west side. If you wanted to get together, you could get together.
I didn't know that. How are you? How close are you? I live on. You know the west side?
Yes, I do. I was born and raised in L.A., so I know it well. So where are you?
You know Factors Deli?
Yeah.
That's where I live. A block and a half south of Factors Deli.
Okay. Yeah, I'm right now. I'm a veteran in Santa Monica, basically.
Oh, well, we'll get together tomorrow or something.
Sure. Give me. I just check your email. I put my phone number and contact info. I'll put it in the chat for you also again, just so you have it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to pull up this thing on a judge forcing Trump or the executive office to not stop the payment for some foreign aid for services that have been delivered. So I'm just going to pull up what it was, and let's see what it says here. Oh, I didn't do that. I got to share it. Let's see what happens if I try to share this. And but if you have it, Ataya, or Joan or Aaron, if you have something you want to present or talk about, just let us know. In the meantime, I'm going to try to pull up something that I think is of interest. And I'm going to try and do that. Got a guy on the screen here. I don't know what that's about. Let's see. That's buy now, so let's go past that.
Restraining order preventing anyone from auditing the Treasury Department, including the Treasury Secretary himself. We're all too familiar with the progressive left making political use of friendly federal judges to hand out nationwide injunctions when they lack the legislative power to assert their political will. It seems there's always a helpful Hawaiian judge when the progressive left needs one. The question is, What to do about these unelected judges with supposedly lifetime appointments who seem determined to act as though they possess greater executive branch authority than does the elected president? Impeachment is always an option, but it's a heavy burden, requiring a full 2/3 of the Senate. That supermajority is a stretch, except under the most egregious of circumstances and highly unlikely today. There is, however, an easier way to remove an overreaching judge from the bench. Let's talk about it. I am, of course, attorney Andrew Branca for the Law of Self-Defense. Hey, folks, I want to take just a moment to invite you all to our upcoming executive has the sole power to administer law, and the judicial branch has the sole power to settle disputes. It also means that each branch is to be largely independent of the other branches within its plenary domain. For example, the judicial branch is not to have the authority to mandate how the executive branch administers the law, which would seem to be precisely what Judge Engelmeyer is doing when he prohibits even the Treasury Secretary from accessing Treasury Department payment systems. Even federal judges have only limited legal authority. Otherwise, the nearly 1,000 federal judges would each be their own unelected black-robed dictators. Certainly, a court order issued by a judge ought to be obeyed, but only if it is a lawful order. For example, if Judge Engelmeyer had ordered Treasury Secretary Bessent to vote for Kamala Harris, no one would reasonably argue that this was a valid order that Bessent was legally obliged to obey. An unlawful order is without legal authority or effect and is properly ignored. So it's a real question whether Judge Engelmeyer, obviously a member of the judicial branch, even has the legal authority to issue an order restraining the Treasury Secretary from accessing Treasury Department records, given that accessing these records is a core executive branch privilege and necessary to the executive function. This is, in fact, the very argument that the Trump administration made the moment courts opened on Monday morning following Judge Engelmeyer's 1 a.m. Saturday night TRO, when the Trump administration submitted an emergency motion, a request to the court to dissolve, clarify, or modify Engelmeyer's ex parte TRO. As the Trump motion to dissolve the TRO notes, Judge Engelmeyer's order is, quote, a remarkable intrusion on the executive branch that is in direct conflict with Article 2 of the Constitution.
Okay, I'm going to pause that. This is from 3 weeks ago, and it had like a million views. So he's making the case that Article 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution gives the executive branch the full authority, actually the president, the full authority to make sure that the funds appropriated by the Congress are properly distributed. It's part of their executive duty to make sure the laws are followed. And that, like this guy said, I didn't know there was 1,000 federal judges. But I don't think you're going to operate too well if they have the authority to intercede and say, no, you got to sign this piece of paper with your left hand because I said so. You know, you can't sign it with your right hand, or this isn't proper. You didn't invite everybody. You know, so I think that that's the issue here. So rather than play this, I'd rather see what people have to say about this. And let's say, because that's what happened today or yesterday, a judge made a ruling that Trump has to distribute funds to foreign nonprofits for services already delivered. And the Supreme Court upheld them with a 5-4. So let's go to Aaron. Oh, yeah, we've got a picture. So Aaron, go ahead. You're on.
Yeah, so I do think it's easy to have this sort of overly simplistic reading of what people think Article 2 of the Constitution says, and that the executive branch has.
It's 1, 2, and 3.
No, I understand the 3 articles. Article 2 governs the executive branch. Article 1 governs the legislative branch. Article 3 is the judiciary branch. So most people who make these arguments, which generally speaking are not very robust, kind of do it in a macro sort of summary way, instead of looking at, well, what was passed in the guidance of that legislation, right? So you can have legislation that constrains executive power by design, right? I mean, we have lots of legislation like that, right? That's not some artificial constraint. That's why it's Article 1 is the legislative branch, which has by design more power than the executive branch. I mean, we have people with a different view of that when it comes to administrative power in the last, let's say, 80 to 90 years, about 90 years. But structurally, the legislative branch, by the design of the Constitution, has what's called supplemental power over the executive branch, which the executive branch doesn't have over the legislative branch. So you can have executive function, right? Executive guidance, and the executive branch is constrained, right? And you have this going back to the reforms that were passed in the 1970s governing Department of Justice responsibilities, given what Nixon attempted to do with the Saturday Night Massacre, and with other constraints he attempted to put on the judiciary, or on the Department of Justice, and then through that the judiciary branch. So I generally find these arguments, when they're made, that that the executive has this sort of unitary power, complete supreme power, as just not passing muster, because going back all the way to first President General Washington, right, the executive branch always has some constraints, and especially when it comes to its behavior relative to legislative guidance. So, I mean, I just don't think that's, I just don't think it passes muster.
I agree with you. There's certainly regulations that were passed by the Congress between the Constitution and today's current president, which says that, they have the 30-day thing in terms of hiring somebody from an appointed agency, and maybe there were certain restrictions on that. But the presentation of the comments, we're going to go to Alex in a second. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question to Aaron. You're still there somewhere, right? Yeah, there you are. Would there be chaos because there's 1,000 federal judges around the country? So any one of them could come up and say, like I said, you signed it with a blue pen instead of a black pen. Therefore, it doesn't.
Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't really work like that, because it isn't like there's 1,000 random judges that randomly decide to take their own aggressive action, right? People bring, which they legally have the right to, a writ in front of a judge, right, and then that judge decides if there's enough merit to be heard, and then those are defined by district standards, right? Because we have the 9 districts in the United States. So it isn't like, so when we say there's 1,000 judges, it's not like all 1,000 judges process this, right? It's like you make a request based on your jurisdiction. You might jurisdictionally shop it, but basically the jurisdiction that you're going to have it in, District 1, 4, 8, 9, whatever district that makes sense to where you believe you're going to have standing. And oftentimes the judge will decide that, no, you don't have proper standing in this district. And then that's passed to another judge or to another district. And then that district assigns a judge, right? So this idea that there's 1,000 judges sort of running around chaotically trying to block the will is sort of absurd, right? Because, it isn't like the judges go out and seek cases. That's not how things work, right? You bring there's a process, right? There's a queuing of your case that then is determined if it has standing. And by the way, most people don't know that 90% of cases people try to bring at the federal level, at the district level, basically don't get heard because they don't have standing. They don't believe there's enough merit. So this idea that you have this sort of there's a pile of super judges blowing up America is sort of absurd, right? I mean, it's just not. It's just not what's really going on.
Well, I did look about a couple of weeks ago. There were 12 different judges that had accepted the case. They didn't dismiss it. They gave it standing on these various things that they were challenging about firing this guy, eliminating that department, and so forth, of the actions of the executive orders. So there was at least 12 judges.
but here's the thing. Dev, you compared this to other periods of time. There are always cases in federal court on what's considered to be executive overreach or agency misappropriation of power. I mean, this is like not abnormal, right? If you're a company and you believe the EPA misread the statute that they enforced on you, you can bring a case against the EPA in federal court. I mean, this isn't like novel, right? This is going on all the time for a century, right? I mean, at this scale, there's nothing abnormal about this. I mean, people are trying to sort of gaslight that to make it sound like it's the unelected popular blah, blah, blah is coming after the popular will. I mean, that sort of plays well to people who don't understand how the judiciary works. But, it's not, I mean, remember, and by the way, you have the ability to appeal. So even if the executive branch loses cases, which they do, they generally win a huge amount of their cases on appeal to the appellate court.
Okay.
And that's why most of these cases are never taken up by the Supreme Court, because they get blown out on appeal, because you got 3 superstar judges who tear apart whatever that lower court ruling was and decide, okay, this is what this really is. And then they confine the boundaries, the guardrails of that case going forward. And then that's it. And then there's the precedent. And unless you can somehow carve something new that's novel that the Supreme Court finds willing to take that case, then that's it. It's like that's going to be the law unless Congress passes a new statute. I mean, that's just how it works.
Okay, well, that's good. That's very excellent points. Let's go to Alex was next, then Mike, and then I'm waiting to see if Jim's going to raise his hand. But Alex, go ahead.
Oh gosh, well, I was first going to make the point Alan made about the appellate level. Again, if one judge does it, or again, one particular panel, again, they can appeal to a higher court, again, including the Supreme Court, where Trump has appointed 3 of the judges, and has, of course, a 6-3 conservative, Republican or conservative, however you want to put it, majority. So and as we saw again in the case you were talking about, again, the Supreme Court, decided against him, or 5-4 against. So, which means I think that probably means 1 or 2 of the guys he appointed voted against him. He was wrong, or his interpretation. And again, like Aaron says, this goes back to the whole idea of the unitary executive, Cheney's whole crazy. I mean, this was decided by the Supreme Court back then in a series of the series of court cases around what was going on at Guantanamo Bay, that threw out those the military courts they had set up to try the 9/11 the alleged terrorists, and basically said no, the Constitution doesn't let the executive just set up his own court system, essentially, especially when there's the possibility that they could be tried in civilian courts. And that's they said back then, it's like 2005-06. That's
okay.
Well, first off, either the Congress should change the law there, but again, that the Constitution, you couldn't. So that's why people like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed are probably never going to be tried, or are just going to be essentially held indefinitely, because due to the fact that we tortured them, we can never introduce the evidence that would actually convict him for, even though he planned 9/11 and was the main planner. But that doesn't matter, because again, his rights were violated, and in any civilian court he would have to set him free. so there's that kind of, again, and they're like Aaron was saying, their whole series of laws back in the 70s in response to not just Watergate, but other scandals about, things like illegal CIA surveillance, obviously, COINTELPRO. So yeah, and again, I think the important thing again is, with what you were talking about, Ken, is the Constitution explicitly sets out, it's the Congress that sets the budget, sets where the money is going to go. So there, yeah, and that's how that's a constitutional law as far as I can see, that and should if we want to have checks and our supposed freedoms and checks and balances, we still think that kind of system is what we want as set up by the Constitution. That again, you have the three equal branches of government that are there to check the power of one over the other. Again, but that's as Trump himself has said, that's not his interpretation. Again, he's literally said, and Elon has said, Trump is a king, and that's that's what well, not we, but well, some of Jim's ancestors, since he always likes to take credit for that, fought a war over, against George III, so that we wouldn't have the American version of a king. And George Washington, among several other great Americans, rejected that whole fucking idea that that even he should have the. And some people were willing. Again, there's a lot of evidence that people were willing to elect him king. Essentially, I mean, there was talk of that after, because of his role in winning the Revolutionary War and so on. But yeah, I mean, despite all of his other issues, he understood that and rejected that, and believed in a Republican government, which I hope we as Americans are still going to be for. And but I'll let Mike chime in now.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Let's go to Mike. Okay, Mike.
Well, first of all, excuse me. First of all, when you talk about a king, when Musk talks about him being a king, there is no king today in any democratic monarchy or constitutional monarchy in which who has or even seeks the amount, the large amount of power that Trump and Musk would want for Trump if he were king. The amount of power they're seeking for him goes beyond what any other king has in a democratic monarchy. But let's look at this as common sense. Trump tries to say several times that he's using common sense, even though I don't think he has any concept of what common sense is. But that's another matter. But if we look at it common sense, okay, Congress allocates the money according to the law, which according to the law is their right and exclusively their right. Okay. Trump says, no, we're cutting that money. So they take it to court. A judge says, no, the judge's job, the executive branch, let me just take a side note here. The job of the judiciary branch is to interpret the law. Congress makes the laws, the judiciary interprets it, and the executive branch executes it. So it goes to court because the executive branch has gone beyond, or in essence, broken the law. And they take it to court so it can be interpreted. The judge says, yes, he has gone beyond the law or broken it, and therefore the money must be returned to USA. So the Trump people say, no, we don't like what that judge says. We're going to take it all the way up to the Supreme Court. They take it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rules the lower court judge was correct. The money must be returned. The interpretation of the law was correct. The money must be returned. Therefore, the money must be returned. If the executive branch, any executive branch, but in particular this one right now, says, no, we don't go by what the Supreme Court said. We're the executive branch. We can do whatever we want. Then they are in violation of the law, the Constitution, and they're acting against the United States of America. So the choice is here. Okay, do you want to throw out you want to throw out the United States of America? We'll still have a country, but it'll be a dictatorship, and it'll be a possibly a fascist dictatorship, and that'll be that. If that's what they want to do, okay, so we'll have another civil war, tens of millions of people will die, whatever, and there'll be nothing left. Fine.
Okay, Mike.
But otherwise, the common sense is he returns the money to USA. Yeah. That's it. It's been decided. It's been decided by the highest court in the land. He doesn't have a choice unless he wants to throw the entire United States out the window. That's common sense. Go on.
Okay, great. Let's go, Aaron, and then Jim. You're not coming in on this, huh?
And
Jim, I'll let you can come on, and you can use 3 curse words just when you're talking about.
Jim's up at the
Columbia. I just have to give you a quota. That's all.
Jim, Jim can't really talk because he's at the Columbia Library. So I don't think.
I can talk. I can talk. I can talk.
So Ken? Oh, Ken?
All right, let's let Aaron go. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, and so I'll be really quick here. I'll be really quick, and I'll give it to Jim. So to reinforce what Mike was saying, that a lot of people don't know, is that even if an executive branch does not, even if an executor or a representative of the executive branch does not conform to a ruling, or the executor itself, or the executive itself doesn't, then judges have the power to do what's called impounding. So let's say they won't spend the money. That is a statute that's been correctly interpreted all the way up the court system. Then a judge, then the Supreme Court and the appellate court can direct a judge to basically act as an administrator of that executive. And you see this happen, not like all the time, but you see it happen. You see it happen at a state level. You see it happen sometimes at a cabinet department level over the years. So, you know, that's built-in precedent. So this idea that, you know, quote unquote, when people say Trump can get away with things, I mean, he could get away with things for a while, but he can't get away with things forever. And more importantly, the executive branch can't get away with these things independent of who's president. Meaning, I'm making it up, but let's say in the 4th year of a Trump term, he decides to not spend XYZ for the Department of Education or whatever it was, then that money, once the courts decide to do impoundment, that money will eventually get directed. It might be a year later, whatever it is, but that money will get directed back to those appropriate sources. I'm not saying the political cost and the social cost won't be there. Of course they will, but in terms of legal. Oh, I don't know what that was, but anyway, so I just wanted to reinforce what Mike was saying. That was it. I'll pass it to Jim now.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Oh, and sure. Don't hang around, please. I'd like you to bring us up to date on AI, because I heard the federal government is not AI, well, AI and Bitcoin. Sure. I heard the government did some progress on that. So, Jim, do you want to make a comment on this, on the court thing? You could tie it back to the same thing. Let me just throw in there for a little chaos. I know that Joe Biden went through this when he was trying to get a forgiving of the student loans, and there were objections to that, and went up to the Supreme Court, and they said, no, you can't do it. But he tried again, I think he tried 3 times to get around that. But he never was able to, write off people's student loan debts. And then his term ran out, so that was over. But anyhow, go ahead, Jim.
Well, I'd be curious to hear what Itai says, because Itai, don't you teach a class on this kind of stuff at John Jay?
Which one?
Don't you teach a class that has to do with constitutionalism and all that, constitutional law or something like politics of that?
I teach legal history, American legal history.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of it, yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So, because Ty would have an interesting take on this. I know Ted would too. Look, he's
pushing us into a constitutional crisis. There's no doubt about it. And, I think his response is going to be similar to what Andrew Jackson did in 1832 when the Supreme Court ruled that the expulsion of Indians was illegal. Okay, enforce it.
You took away the point I was about to make. Thank you. You're more smart than me. Continue, please.
No, that's all right. I just think that it's sort of, and look at what's going on in Israel. With Netanyahu, with these other sidebar trials that has to do with his power. Sort of interesting to see this go on, although the legal tradition is different, of course. So we're just heading for a constitutional crisis. My great fear is particularly with the budget issues that are being debated. I mean, really, if you have cutting off and severe attacks on Medicaid and Medicare, that is building a tinderbox where there could be a social explosion. We could have a situation where something happens, where somebody's killed, and then we'll have a similar response to what happened when George Floyd was killed. And then, of course, Trump has no restraints on imposing emergency powers from the presidency, the same way he did with the people who were in his cabinet when he was president the first term. So, you don't have a General Mattis, you don't have a General Kelly, you don't have a General McMaster, you don't have General Miley. And he basically has essentially Wilhelm Keitel and Alfred Yodel. He's looking for those kind of guys who will carry out his demands. And so we are in for one hell of a crazy rough ride. And, the whole idea of the unitary executive, I mean, that's a big debated issue. Both the Democrats and the Republicans benefit from unitarian executive definitions. Obama certainly did. He issued lots of executive orders. But somebody like Trump, he's going to take it on to a different level. And so, yes, we are in a constitutional crisis right now, unfortunately.
Okay, anybody else on this? No? Okay, yeah, that's it. So buy a ticket, pick another country to go to. Go ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
Dan, he keeps saying that nobody has the right to question what the president does. Wasn't he saying that? That the courts can't question any. He could do whatever he wants. That's what I thought I read.
I don't know that he's publicly saying, well, it doesn't matter what he says or
not. Yeah, I know.
The question about if it gets, who's going to stand up, who's going to control, is going to be the army, is going to turn into complete banana republic or whatever. I think it's a question of not willing to cooperate and handle people, tolerate with people who have a different opinion, both sides. Because I think the Democrats were pretty rough on Trump when he was in office and in between, and when he tried to run, and they tried to get him off the ballot in 5 or 10 different states, and they tried to impeach him twice and could put him on, ridiculous criminal trials, anything to stop him from getting elected or getting on even running. So that was intolerance, and he's being intolerant. So we'll see what happens on it. But okay, so let's go back to Mike, and then I'm gonna, because we have a special attendant here, Aaron. I want to talk about what's up with the Bitcoins or the cryptocurrency and AI, which is kind of an area I think Aaron knows a lot about. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to say that the reason that people didn't want Trump to run, and that wasn't just Democrats, it was some Republicans, not nearly enough, but there were some Republicans as well. The reason was because they were concerned that he was going to do exactly what he's doing. They were concerned that he was not fit to be president because he either didn't understand or didn't care about what the responsibilities and the limitations of the presidency were, so that they would have a fundamentally irresponsible player in the White House. I don't think it's because it had to do with policies or something like that. When he was impeached for good reason. There were some impeachments that are not for very good reason. These were. There was definite justification for those impeachments. They were.
Oh, well, that's a matter of opinion. You know that.
Excuse me. Hold on. No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
This is not my opinion.
It is your opinion.
Evidence.
Yes.
They came up, Ken.
The first time was with the Russian thing, which turned out to be a fraud. The other thing was he was being impeached
try to let somebody finish
stuff.
their sentence before you interrupt, if you're going to interrupt. Otherwise, they're not going to let you finish yours.
Okay,
what
go
I'm
ahead.
saying is there was more than enough evidence to impeach. They did not convict, but they impeached him. There was nothing wrong with those impeachments. You could say they were politically biased, but there was enough justification to impeach. Now, what Jim was saying about a constitutional crisis, I personally believe we were in a constitutional crisis on the evening of January 20th. We didn't know it yet. But this is going to turn into it's going to become more and more obvious that we're in a constitutional crisis because we have somebody in the White House who wants more power, more leeway than he is entitled to under the Constitution of the United States. So we have a constitutional crisis. Again, common sense. Okay, Ken.
Well, okay, so let me ask you a follow-up question. Don't you feel that the existing institutions in the United States will be able to handle that if it's inappropriate seize of power? The courts, the military, what else?
Well,
the Congress gets together and says, "Oh, this is bad. This is no good. We have to handle this." Because I think people, including Republicans, are aware whatever they let Trump get away with can flop next election when you get a Democratic president. And that's, because you set a principle that can be violated on either side. So don't you think the institutions that we have are adequate to handle this kind of a problem?
Well, they haven't been doing it yet, except for the judiciary in this case. They haven't been handling it yet. They haven't been performing their duties responsibly yet. I mean, you can say what you want. No, but in other words, this thing shouldn't have even gotten up to the Supreme Court. But it had to, and all these other things that he's pulled also need to go up, apparently, to the Supreme Court because people are not doing their jobs. And no, I don't think it's the case. And yes, he can do what Andrew Jackson says and said, okay, go ahead and enforce it. Well, they can return money, but there's going to come to a point when when the military is going to have to decide whether or not they are answerable to the commander in chief or they're answerable, as they are supposed to be, to the Constitution of the United States.
Right.
And it comes to that point where the military has to decide whether or not we survive as a nation. We're already in a shit show. Excuse my language.
Okay, good enough. All right, so if can we switch the topic now, or does anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, I did want to comment.
Argument.
Yeah, I did want to comment a little more on that. Is that?
Go ahead.
I do agree with Jim that the sui generis, like we're in a sui generis environment now, and he's a sui generis individual or actor. I do believe that the more, like, say, appropriate, sorry about that, the more appropriate analogy is towards the end of the first term or the middle to end of the first term of FDR, where he did have obviously we love FDR. He's an all-time, first ballot Hall of Famer. You put him up there with, all the greats. But objectively, if let's say his last term in office ended in 1940, prior to World War II, prior to U.S. entry in World War II, we definitely would have looked at him as a sui generis unitary executive, right? Who, basically threatened and
defeated the Supreme Court because he threatened to pack and basically destroy the modern Supreme Court. And so I do think Trump is channeling his version of that early or that first term FDR, right? And now I think the difference, of course, is FDR had a mandate coming into 32 election 33 to quote unquote, save the country, and he got the votes congressionally, electoral college, the whole 9 yards, popular vote. Like, he got the true definition of a mandate for that. And I think in some ways what Trump has done is he's taken an FDR like mandate, like software off the shelf, and just sort of slapped it in, rebranded it as Trump, and then said, I have the same mandate, with none of the electoral popular infrastructure that FDR had in 1932, right? Because, FDR had a win that is, 50 times or 30 times what Trump's win was. And so my view of a lot of what Trump is doing is he's basically challenging, assaulting, volumetrically launching waves and initiatives that are faster than the normal legislative legal appeal process, right? And so what he's doing is, like, in military terms, for anyone that's been around this stuff long enough, he's constructed an OODA loop, basically, right? An OODA, an OODA loop, that he is basically overwhelming the decision cycle of his, as he perceives it, enemies, threats, blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. And he's basically flooding that decision tree architecture, which was never designed for, doing this, right? Basically, that's just the way it is, which of course is going to create eventually a legislative response to this, obviously. Maybe not now, maybe not in a year, but it's inevitable, right? So he's building the doom of ever being able to OODA loop things like this. So, and the old-fashioned way to do this is you put all these little wait periods, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, and he's sort of just blowing through those speed bumps, just buying bigger trucks for his, big truck, or for Cybertruck, that was a pun intended, and basically blowing past them. The issue he runs into, though, is normally you are given at the executive branch some leeway in terms of what's called exigent situations or circumstances, and you can, let's say you had to do something in 20 days and the wait period was 30 days. They'll grant you that usually, like 1 time, 2 times, 3. But if you're doing that across the board, thousands, hundreds of thousands of times, then it's obvious that you're just not following the statute. And eventually that's where I believe all of the brakes get just jammed up. And ultimately what's going to happen here is all of this is going to just freeze at a certain point, and then he's going to run around screaming like a 5-year-old and, yelling at everybody. But you can't yell your way out of an appellate court ruling, right? It just doesn't work. And the appellate court's not going to respond to that. And so that's where he's going to get stuck. And the Congress, he doesn't have enough of a congressional majority to pass anything, really. Forget about, like, even if you had numbers, like, they are not coalitionally engineered to pass laws. Like, that's, I think, the big thing he runs into. Even if he had 20 more votes, I don't think he passes laws very easily, because they're not structured like a coalition to pass laws. So okay, I think all this jams up.
I want to follow up with one thing, but there was I can't remember the name of it, the War Act, that the president can only send in troops for like 7 days, and then he's got to get approval from Congress for an act of war.
The War Powers Act, which has a whole bunch of provisos. That's why the Marine Corps is the Marine Corps in some ways. So the president has more agility to use a percentage of the Marine Corps for 90 days, 60 days, 30 days. You can't say, you couldn't launch the whole Marine Corps anyways, right? You can't launch 250,000 people in this country to do anything. And
so was there approval of the occupation of Afghanistan, or it's not required for funding of the Israel or the funding of Ukraine? So they're like proxy wars.
Yeah, but remember, like, there's no law that calls it a proxy war. This is all like interpretive, critical theory, blah, 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 modern social science. Like, legally, there's nothing that calls it a proxy war. I mean, there's a War Powers Act, which objectively has not been enforced consistently ever, really, in our modern history. And at this point, it's really de jure de facto that presidents just don't follow it. And Congress, and by the way, that's a thing people don't get, that if there's a law or there's a statute that everybody accepts for decades, no matter what party's in, no matter what extremes, that everyone just doesn't follow, and Congress just lets everyone not follow, then that's literally considered an ex post law. Like, it's just, we just don't treat it like a law, which, by the way, this happens all the time, right? Police aren't all, New York City police don't enforce jaywalking unless you're crazy in front of like 50 trucks that are coming down and they're literally trying to save your life. Like, yes, they might pull you out, scream at you, maybe give you a ticket if you're not nice. But in other cities, because the culture is like, you walk across the street, people die, then yeah, they'll give you a $40 ticket or a $90 ticket, right? So this happens all the time legally. So ultimately, when Congress approved the money for Afghanistan, Iraq, Ukraine, Taiwan, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Once they approve that money consistently, then that is them, because they have their chance to say, well, you didn't follow the War Powers Act, but I'm giving you money. Well, then Congress is acceding to saying, yeah, like, you're agreeing with the policy, right? You can't come back here and say you broke the law. Like, no one's going to have standing in that case.
Right. Even if you're doing it under the color of getting security work from Black Hawk, whatever, basically.
Or Blackwater, whatever. Yeah, because, and remember, one thing someone mentioned earlier, Mike did, where the military is going to have to step into this. I do not agree that the military is going to step into this. I'm not saying somebody in a uniform is going to do one thing one day. I mean, yes, we have 2 million people under uniform at some level. So someone always does something. But what I mean is, like, structurally, you're not going to have Northern Command generals and deciding in the National Command Authority, NCA, decide. I mean, like, none of that's going to enter into this, right? The JCS isn't going to take a stand on this. And ultimately, because what people don't get is that the president has to get funding every year. The executive branch has to request funding every year from Congress, right? The military is only can live as long as it can pass an omnibus defense bill, right? That's it, right? So you can't pass that bill, you don't get your paycheck when you're in the military, right? Like, the military is not, like, there's not a Social Security trust fund for people in the military, and they get paid no matter what happens. Those are annualized payments that come in through the defense bill. So, this idea that the military is going to step in, I just don't see it. I don't see it financially. I don't see it operationally. I'm not saying you won't get a rogue wacko colonel or rogue wacko, you always get funky, weird people, but I'm saying structurally, no one's deploying the 3rd Armored Cav Regiment in the United States to solve a problem. Like, that's not happening.
Okay.
No, I just point of information, Aaron, I was referring to an extreme situation all the way down the line when everything was just falling apart. No, not structurally, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And by the way, and I think an important last quick point, before you'd ever deploy, you would never deploy active duty forces. You deploy National Guard first and foremost, because of the state deputization power that can be granted to National Guard forces that is not allowed to be granted to active duty force. Actually, there's a tiny little carve out for these, like, UGA, like Jim's buddies and super SOCOM JSOC type people. But that's you're not deploying whole massive divisions, right? Like, that's a handful of people that get special authority to do something for 30 or 90 days. But structurally, you're not activating a U.S. Army active duty, combat power unit and deploying it in a non-national emergency that hasn't been requested by statutory authority, which you can only do through FEMA, through a natural disaster authority. I mean, there's these very, very specific carve outs, right? Like, and the last quick point is that most people don't realize, like, when you had the LA riots, it was National Guard units that were called, actually, I was active duty then, but my old National Guard unit 18th Cav Reg was actually called in to active duty, and then a U.S. active duty unit was placed under that National Guard authority, right? Because that authority is with the state governor. The governor works with the executive branch to actually associate that authority, right? So that's why, like, you know, it's not like these movies, the Civil War movies or all that stuff. Like that stuff just, I mean, yes, you get to some end days, but you know, at that point, the world's a hell of a lot more screwed up than we are.
That's right. Okay, Alex, be brief though, because I want to go on to the next section. Go ahead.
I want to give another example to back up what Aaron was saying. You know, we have the Leahy Amendment, which is, you know, supposed to be the law that, you know, oh, you can't give military aid to military units or armies that have committed, war crimes or, you know, violated human rights. But that's rarely enforced. And of course, we've seen, you know, Israeli units, you know, videotape them, well, put out, you know, TikTok videos of themselves committing war crimes. And, you know, not a single one of them had their funding cut off by the U.S. government, you know, during the last.
Alex, they have to do something that has to go through legal means and everything like that. It has to be determined.
Well, we actually know that.
I mean, no. It's not something where you watch a video.
Because we know, because State Department officials have said that the State Department was essentially lying about them. You know, some of them became whistleblowers, some of them, you know, resigned over this. And, you know, it's pretty clear that they just pretended that, you know, they didn't, again, you know.
Alex, it wasn't a legal, it didn't go through the legal system. It didn't, in other words, they resigned because of what they saw on the video, but there wasn't enough.
Again, as I'm telling you, Mike, again,
where it was determined that it was a war crime. That's all. I mean, you may be right. You may be right that it was.
Don't believe your lying eyes. You know?
No, Alex. Alex.
I mean,
hey, Mike, let him finish talking. Go ahead.
Okay, you're right.
You can't deny that some war crimes have been committed and filmed, you know, by the Israelis themselves, that they, you know, where they're proud about blowing up a university, or, you know, they're, you know, just casually, well, I mean, in some cases, I think they videotaped themselves booby trapping, you know, civilian homes.
That's in the barbaric. Alex, that's in the barbaric part of the world. We're not talking about civilized society like we have in.
Okay, Alex, it's the Palestinians that aren't civilized. No, I'm sorry. I guess the Israelis are so civilized.
No. I'm just saying that everybody there is barbaric.
Come on.
No. Alex.
I'm not defending the Israelis. I'm saying if you want to go look at this as a comparative thing of governments all over the world and different societies and everything, there's a whole different issue. We're really just talking about the U.S. So can't get into that. So let's shift over. Let's shift over.
Wait, before you do, you cannot.
Go ahead, Mike. Right, brief.
You cannot take a video. You watch the video. You interpret it. You say, it's obvious. When I hear the word obvious, I know there's something wrong. I know this person is putting their own bias or whatever into it.
Right. There's actually there's a group of words like that are, you know, cornball things. Obvious. Everybody knows. It makes sense. The matter of fact, it's common sense. You know, every time somebody says that, I'm saying, like, why don't you give me some numbers, please? And let me tell me where you got them from. But let's move over to another topic that I don't believe we've discussed here at all, but we have Aaron here. And I'll bring up a short thing here just to show you that there's something going on about it in the world. And that's this. I think it's over there. Come on. It's that the, oh, come on. I got an ad in the way, so I'm not, there it is. Can you see that? The White House is having a crypto summit. And, you know, this is shocking. This is like being in French class, but you thought, you know, you get. I once, when I was in, I guess it was high school, I'm in the third year of French, and I said, how the hell did I get in here? I have no idea what they're talking about. So, it's Crypto Summit, Trump to lead talks on regulation and industry collaboration. And it sounds like not just the US, but even other countries are looking at starting to implement some kind of crypto technology as opposed to just letting it run out in the wilds outside of government. So the government's going to get some kind of control on it. Scary as far as I'm concerned. Aaron, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so to be really simple, one of the approaches that the Trump team, and really more importantly, the younger members of that team, including his son, Barron, starting in the summer, they recognized that there was a gap in the Democratic Party in terms of what people call tech bros, but it's more than that, right? It's definitely this newer market technologies that are both financial, social, etc. And they appealed to them with a different approach at a regulatory level. And by the way, people forget that like Gensler, who was the last SEC chair, he was really pro we'll call it financial technology innovation, going into the Biden administration. In some ways, the Biden administration, or people within it, sort of bent him away from that. So they sort of sowed a little bit of their own seeds when it came to this. So this is what you'd call classic, it's not unique. It's classic payback, which is to build an industry consortium, kind of group to advise on the White House and on Congress in passing what you'd call pro crypto, in this case, legislation and regulation. And one of the aspects of it is to, this is where it's going to get weird, because at an executive branch level, the Treasury Department actually has an enormous amount of latitude, and the Federal Reserve does, in implementing financial policy and acquiring assets in their portfolios, right? In their sort of book, their financial book that they have. And it makes sense, right? We really don't want Congress in the slow, deliberative way constantly legislating a portfolio, right? That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So what they're doing is they're leveraging that authority, and they're, I think, probably just trying to stumble their way through to see if they can find a vehicle, because that's the real issue, is where do you hold crypto, right? Because crypto is not a treasury bill, right? It's not mortgage-backed securities. It's not a debt security, right? It's not cash, right? Because when you look at the majority of what the government holds, or almost all of what the government holds, except when they impound something like the SEC does, or DEA or FBI, which is small amounts comparatively, is basically just credit instruments and cash, right? That's 99% of what the government holds. Well, crypto isn't classified as either, right? It has no classification because nobody wants to give it classification, because the moment you do that, then you start giving it a basis to tax, a basis to account for an accounting treatment like FASB and the International Association of Accountants and all that stuff. So it lives in this gray zone, and this commission is acting as this sort of gray zone moderator, which their goal is to just basically say the government's pro crypto, pro financial innovation, try to find some vehicle meaning like some place that isn't passed by law. Eventually they're going to have to pass a law that they could park a crypto that the government would acquire, that they would go in the market and buy. And by the way, going into the market to buy instruments that the government is not a party to is actually requires its own statutory authority. Usually the federal government doesn't do that. They pass that over to the Federal Reserve.
because Federal Reserve, people don't realize, has all these regional banks that basically have their own trading windows, so they can go get stuff when they need to, right? Like say, pretend a bank, and they do it all the time, right? The FDIC goes in, picks up a bank because it's, you know, falling apart, and they step in, they relaunch the bank in a matter of hours to days, maximum a few weeks. And then they bring all those instruments, all those accounts, all those assets back online. And if they need to, they infuse resources, usually cash, but they will also infuse securities when necessary, right? So as an example, you might have a bank that's balance sheet sort of imploded, and you could put other bank securities on that bank's balance sheet and say, you know, basically you're going to run that bank for a year and put a whole new team in, and they're just not going to sell those bank securities for 2 years, right? They'll have JP Morgan stock, they'll have Citibank stock, UBS, whatever. So that's like, so the Fed and the FDIC, I mean, this is what they do. This is their like job, right? Like they're good at this. Like they're, you know, like they're professional, like NFL, you know, coaches at doing this stuff, running teams. So ultimately, this crypto is going to have to, the instrumentation of it is going to have to happen through either a new agency with its own vehicles or through the Fed.
Right. But let me interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
So there are, you know, mysterious fiscal instruments like bonds and certificates and I-bonds and different things that are mystify most of us. We don't understand.
Sure.
Trade balance, you know, trading currencies. There's
Sure.
all kinds of things. It would seem to me that the whole thing with the crypto movement was to stay away from the government, so you didn't have to pay taxes, so you didn't have to worry about them restricting your activities.
I mean that's as an individual.
Why else have crypto?
Market letter. I'm sorry.
Why else would you have crypto? You can gamble with stocks and bonds and everything all over.
So look, you're bringing up a really good point. There's a younger generation of people who, in lots of their beliefs, it won't just be financial. It'll be in their beliefs around sociology, their beliefs around healthcare, medicine, lifestyle. I mean, you name it. They have what you would call anti-institutional, unorthodox beliefs. And so that population, which I separate from older populations, view crypto and just like anything else, like a power milkshake that you buy because you saw some guys on YouTube and they sell vitamins, right? Or whatever, right? And we make fun of them, but I guarantee you everyone here when they were 22, 25 fell for some stupid shit too. And we're not that much better than anyone else. Let's not pretend we are. And so this is just their generation of doing that stuff, right? Like all of us here did those Columbia CD and cassette tape scams and collected a bunch of cassette tapes and CDs in the 80s. And then we forgot to send it in, and our parents screamed at us because we got a bill for $14.99, which back then was a hell of a lot of money for 1 month, and blah, blah, blah. And we didn't cancel it, and we had to buy 3 and you know, all that bullshit. And then they made fun of us for 2 years, right? So this is their version of that. And I separate that from we'll call it the crypto industry itself, which is its own industry, which is this global combination of technology, tax avoidance, new products, correlated assets, which means they move in the same direction as other assets. Even though they were supposed to not do that, they're supposed to be, as you know, the new gold, the new whatever. They're not. The stock market goes down, crypto prices go down. It's really simple because the same people doing the same amplified bets, looking for alpha, looking for high returns, are the same people doing that in crypto, right? And so, or not all of them, but a huge percentage of we'll call it the crypto trader market, right? So you have this young cohort, you have the crypto industry, you have the trader market for crypto, and then you have what I might call the long holders of it, which just view it as another asset class. They hold art, they hold this, they hold, they have real estate. They just, they're balanced, right? They don't want to be overly correlated. And so that's that group. And then there's what I call the religious crypto people, right? Which is actually pretty small. These are people who this is their new god, right? Like just it's really simple. And so those are like the 5-6 groups that have something to do with crypto. Now, what's gone on in this administration, I think, and by the way, I believe that some version of this was going to happen with Harris, because this is ultimately about a thermostatic response to younger voters. And so let's say Harris won, and let's say a disproportionate amount of younger voters, voted for her, blah, 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 that Trump got, blah, 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 she won. You were going to likely have a more pro crypto Harris administration compared to Biden. Might not be as intense as Trump, but whatever, it would be at least half the way there. So this is about paying that back to those 5, 6, 7 cohorts. And the reason this matters is a lot of these people, crypto has replaced a big percentage of their legacy of what most of us would have just saved in 401ks, IRAs. If you had a little extra money, you buy, S&P 500 or buy a piece of property and develop it or whatever. They don't do that. They buy crypto. They trade crypto, right? And this whole infrastructure behind it, which is, it has all these weird terms that nobody's heard of in anything else that they talk about, stakes and hashes and all this other stuff. Very computer programming centric. But so that's what this is about. It's almost like what they're doing is trying to make a market, like an old school market making function, which we've done this before, right? We did this with Fannie, Freddie, with mortgages, right? People don't realize we didn't have a mortgage market in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. Like that didn't exist, right? We made a mortgage market actually under Nixon. People forget how liberal Nixon really was, actually, in a lot of ways. Like you strip Vietnam away, he's probably, and his crazy Watergate shit, he's probably the most liberal president since probably FDR. But so we created markets for mortgages. This is them trying to create a crypto market, basically, right? And by the way, there is markets because there's Coinbase, there's these index structures, but this is a little different. Go ahead.
Let me just intersect for a second.
Yeah, sure.
I was working in the mortgage industry,
sure.
computer industry, sort of. And if they would take $25 million worth of mortgages, put them together and sell stock shares in them. That's probably what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a securitization.
Most in financial vehicles, or I used to cover, financial instruments. That's what I used to call them. Cover everything. But they somewhere along the line they connect to something you can hit with a hammer. Like
that's right.
Mortgages are on houses.
That's right.
Stocks have to do with a company. Even if it's an aesthetic, somebody publishing a book or making a movie. Well, you got the movie, you can see it. So if you invested in a production, or you invested in a person's career, he's going to get up on the stage and sing. So somewhere it comes into the real universe. But the crypto thing seems to be apparently there is nothing.
No, there isn't. And well, so here's the way to look at it. There's
no
nothing.
Bag. You can't get a bag of beans.
So here's the issue. There is esoteric assets. I mean, they just exist, right? So let's pretend Mike has a set of objects, and not even objects, of inks, even that go back to some Greek period. And let's just say there's this insane tulip craze that anyone who owns the Greek inks are just the most magical people on earth. So Alex's magical Greek inks, which are normally just basically, no offense, friggin' old ink, which just has the value that it has to somebody who probably just fixes things, right? Like somebody, who's a curator or someone who fixes objects. It doesn't have much, it has the value there, like so much per ounce or whatever.
There is a very ephemeral commodity that people negotiate. Like they buy the full works of the songs created by
That's right.
The Beatles, so songs created by Michael Jackson.
Well, no. But to take it a step further, and most of you are probably too old for this. I sort of am too, but I have younger. I've kids in their 20s, and I like music. But so you take a world famous EDM, like a electronic dance music DJ, right? They get paid millions of dollars for like to go out to like, you know, Ibiza, these amazing places. They play these awesome concerts. Now, technically, they really don't have IP, right? Because everything they're doing is so synthesized. But they can take that synthesizing, package it up, and turn it into rights. And they turn it into rights because they said they're the ones that did it. If all of us came here, and let's pretend all of us were into DJing, and we literally copied or built our own version, it was exactly the same, that would have zero value. It only has value because one of those famous, you know, DJs, what do you call it, Skill X, or one of these superstars that makes 20, 50 million a year doing this, says this is their synthesized. And so in a lot of ways, what crypto is doing, well, and when we say crypto, let's be very specific. There's Bitcoin, and then there's a group of what I call almost wannabes, and then there's a pile of garbage, right? And so and that's the Doge coins and all that other kind of memes and all that stuff. So the crypto itself has a historical engineered path, meaning it comes from a set of you know, mathematical proofs and computer science engineered outcomes that were then created into databases and are formed as a mathematical proof that everyone transparently can see. And then you go to their copycats, others that made their own version of it, that don't have the same providence, would be the right way to put it almost. They're still worth something, right? Like, you know, like in art, you will get a second tier Dutch painter who's not Vermeer. It's still worth something. It's just not worth what a Vermeer is worth, right? So it's the same type of thing. But then you have the people who are literally like selling prints. And obviously those prints are worth literally the cost of paper and shipping, and, you know, give them $40 for putting it together or something. So you have these three tiers. When we say crypto, the right way to put it is it's Bitcoin, which has about 85% of the value of everything that's crypto. It's about $3 trillion. And then there's this group of 4 or 5 others. You hear them, you know, that are like Ethereum, Ripple. There's like 5, 6 of them, and they're worth.
Trump made one, didn't he?
No. That's the third category. Oh. That's the meme coins and all the junk. We could create one. Jim should have a meme coin. There's a software website. You could just make your own, and, you know, they're worth zero. We just pay each other to just play around with them. We, you know, like Alex could put a bid in for 2 cents. I have some for 3 cents. You know, basically, you know how you play cards when you're like old days, you get a bunch of pennies because you had all your penny, you know, for going to the bank. Instead of going to the bank, you take all the pennies and play cards with them.
Speculative.
Yeah, it's all speculative. It's complete garbage. So,
well, I got to give you a credit, because as far as I can see, for the people sitting here, they haven't fallen asleep yet. And Mike has raised his hand, so he's brave enough to contribute on this topic.
And Ken, I did want to ask Aaron.
Go ahead, ask the question.
Then
we'll go to Mike.
Have they put in any protection or regulation to prevent this from being like another series of, you know, CDO, you know, subprime mortgage that could, you know, crash the economy? And
so the answer is no, but. So what you see right now is people don't realize that at the corporate pension fund infrastructure level, there's a whole bunch of, you know, we don't want to call it laws, but self-regulating guidance that are very, very constraining, actually. Like if you're someone who blows through those, no one's going to hire you because they're going to see you as a sociopath. Because, you know, these are the coalition of 20,000 CFOs around the world that say, or treasurers that say, do this, not that, take this risk to here, but not here. And then you're sociopath Joe, and you go off the rails, and you go, oh, well, and then you say, I put my job in. It's like, nope, no one's hired. You're done, basically. You're like the Treasury Association kicks you out, like you're done. So inside that world, pension fund managers, CFOs, controllers, treasurers, et cetera, public companies for sure. And then most large private companies the same way. They are, without saying they are just basically excluding this. By the way, they exclude art. They exclude speculative real estate. I mean, so this isn't unique. They exclude everything that has speculation, opacity, and esoteric nature for obvious reasons. You're a treasurer. What's the number one thing you want to be able to do? Convert whatever you have into cash to pay somebody else that you need to pay, right? That's the whole point, right? So that world has sort of excluded itself in a self-regulatory standpoint. The financial markets, the banks, have excluded crypto from their balance sheets. And my belief, without anyone saying this is the Federal Reserve, basically. And so at the Fed level, the Fed has classification of quality of assets. It's A through F. So an A quality asset is U.S. Treasuries, basically top government bonds, Japanese, U.S., German, blah, 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 whatever, all the good stuff. And then underneath that, it just keeps going down. U.S. equities, U.S. equities that have the highest liquidity, right, that are traded the most, Microsoft's, blah, 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 all that stuff, because you could just sell it, right? If you got 100,000 shares of Microsoft in your portfolio at a bank, you can just dump it. It's like cash. It's basically cash. You might get less than whatever you marked it at, but it's like it's not like you're not going to get anything out of it. So as you move down, you move into these less liquid, poorly priced or impossible to price markets. And crypto has been sort of crushed in down there without them saying crypto's bad. They're just saying, we're not classifying it as an A, B, or C quality asset. And the reason this is important is there's a pyramid that banks have to have in terms of collateral, right? Which governs literally how the bank is able to gear and steer risk, how many loans they're allowed to have, what's the loan ratio to collateral. And so generally speaking, all that's counted as collateral is A, B, and C assets. That's it. And crypto is not an A, B, or C asset. So the industry sort of behind the scenes, without getting gaslit by the crypto bros or anyone else, and then Trump people, to be blunt, are just too dumb, basically, to understand this until they do, too clumsy. They basically self-regulated the risk out. That doesn't mean you're not going to find a bozo pension fund manager at some small teacher's college that's going to screw up and do something, but that's almost fraudy. Like someone paying themselves or buying a real estate thing that was a dumb call. So you'll get a bunch of dumb stories like that. But structurally, JP Morgan doesn't have a $300 billion crypto stake, right? Or Citibank or any, that's just not happening out there. And they're not going to have that. Not in any time that we're going to measure that makes any sense.
Yeah, but here's a major button. So I buy 10 Bitcoins, just to keep it simple. And in 3 weeks, it turns into 5,000 Bitcoins. Or the value of a Bitcoin has increased. But the value of a Bitcoin, you're not paying dollar bills to get the Bitcoins, right?
No, you are. So
you are. But you have to sell them.
Yeah, so once again, let's be really specific. When you say Bitcoin, crypto Bitcoin, you absolutely are either paying with other accepted instruments. So maybe you had other less valuable instruments that were crypto, and you found your sucker that you could convert that to, so you could buy higher quality crypto. So you kind of trade across them. So in that case, you have something. So if you wanted to cash that in, you could cash that in on your Coinbase account and to your bank or to your stock account and transfer that money. Now, you obviously be taxed on it, and that's where the problems come in. We do not have clean tax treatment on this at all. So it's all over the place. So if let's say everyone here had one Bitcoin that you guys all bought 12 years ago, and then you didn't even know you had it, and now it's worth, you know, 100 grand, and now you're like, oh wow, I want 20 of that grand. I want to sell a fraction of that, give some money to my aunt, my daughter, my nephew, whatever, to help them with something, buy a car, whatever. The moment you convert that, whatever percentage you convert or sell the whole Bitcoin, that 20 grand will be a capital gain, because it'll show that you bought this, you know, just like you bought, you know, Microsoft 12 years ago, and now you sell it today. That's a capital gain. You'll have a 20% capital gains tax on it that you have to pay, and that's it. And so at that point, it's just like any other asset. The issue you have that's weird is a lot of people are trying. It's very much like the mortgage market. This is where I think Alex has some right feels. There's a group, smaller, tiny group, that's sort of tax hacking this crypto ecosystem. The problem is that this is more small market stuff, meaning hundreds of thousands to millions. Once you start getting into the tens or hundreds of millions, your transaction status changes, and the collateral and the wait time, the clearance, like you know from securities, you have clearance, moves up, and the reporting requirements move up. So at that point, you're then going to get a knock on the door from, or you're not going to knock on the door, you're going to get a letter from the IRS and or other parties, in some cases other countries, because most people don't realize crypto doesn't have a fraud layer to it, meaning like that's why all these criminals that are like, oh, I'm gonna whatever, kidnap you, pay me in crypto, they all get caught. They all think this stuff is not transparent. This is like literally the most transparent asset out there in like history, because your coded Bitcoin is on a database, and the moment that's transacted, that database is like timestamped with your transaction, and wherever you decided to exchange that, to convert it to you know, euros, dollars, pesos, whatever, it's going to be done at some institution, and you have to show up, and the camera's on, and guess what? Probably someone from the tax authority who says this is a weird transaction for 500 million pesos, and away you go. You're going to get popped. And these guys get popped all the time for this. And this comes down to all these kind of like libertarian tech bros that like think they're smarter than they really don't understand how the regulatory architecture works and how integrated it is, especially nowadays. Completely integrated.
Wasn't that the guy that Trump just pardoned? Who's
Absolutely.
One who, I forget what he found. He found some crypto, clearinghouse, whatever. And he's,
exactly.
I guess I mean, some people, of course, say, oh, the feds, you know, went after him, because, you know, he's creating this. And again, they have, like you were saying, some people have this idea that like, oh, yeah, the crypto is going to let us, you know, take over the banks and, you know, create a perfect society.
I mean, some of this goes back.
We're going to put JP Morgan out of business.
I mean, some of this is really weird. Some of this goes into a little bit of anti-Semitism. Let's just be real about it. The moment people are like anti-banks, the Jews, da. There's some of that. Not a lot, but it's still there. There's a tinge. Let's not pretend it's not there. And then there's a lot of anti-institutionalism, just straight up like banks are bad. By the way, I always tell people, banks are fantastic, right? We constructed a fractional banking system that gives us the full power to have really powerful credit relationships, all the way down to instrumenting you buying a washing machine. Why do you want to replace that? Like, why? Doesn't make any sense, right? I got a credit card, you know, right here that work,
right?
And you know, I have my cash back card. I got my debit card. I mean, all this stuff works. It's integrated together in one account structure. And if you have a larger banking relationship with Wells, B of A, whatever, you can literally have every single thing under one transfer. You log in once, whatever your bank is, Citi, B of A, whatever, you know, Key Bank, you know, PNC, whatever. And every transaction you have in your life is all under one sheet. And every time you want to, your kid needs some money, or you want to take a second out on your home, it's right there. You just
wanted to also ask about what privacy rights are people going to have in this new, again, in terms of, I mean, because that's something, again, a lot of the
my issue is not going to be privacy. It's going to be fraud. Because when you have a lot of uncomplicated actors that have to set up things like wallets, which is like a term in the crypto industry, right? Your account is a wallet, right? And you have to then store your password, your hash, all this stuff, and you have to track, and then you have to do the accounting. It's just like people are going to get taken advantage of or screw up, and then the way the industry is structured, it's got a lot more. The best analogy to me is the 19th century oil rush, right? It's you had a wildcatting to the west and the southwest, or starting from Pennsylvania to the west, basically, and which most people don't realize, the oil capital of the world was actually LA in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Actually, we had hundreds of thousands of dikes. You still have them here. You still have thousands of oil dikes here.
The oil derrick in Chinatown.
I mean, you still got thousands of these left here. The oil derricks are here that are still there and still pumping a few, barrels a day each. So, but the point is that kind of boom, which was sort of every man for himself, until you had enough market power by a handful, let's say the top 10, that they really started to smooth the market. That's really what we're in this crypto space. I mean, I think a lot of this is more noise than reality, because for the government to buy crypto, it's going to have to, from an act of Congress, just like TARP, it's going to have to be like a TARP deal, right? Remember TARP? Like Congress has to pass a law. People just don't know how this shit really works. They have to pass a law that says buy blank $80 billion worth of crypto, put it into this vehicle, store it for this period of time under these guidelines and rules. That's what they're going to have to do. But by the way, like, it's almost like, so what, really, at a certain point? It's like, do you really care that the Federal Reserve, I mean, if you're a trader, you might, but under normal circumstances, do you care that the Federal Reserve's holdings in mortgages has dropped from a few $100 billion to 30 or 40 billion right now because of interest rates being higher? But then once the rates come down, they'll hold more just as a protection, like a hedge, in case there's problems in the mortgage market. That's the same thing.
Aaron, I want to ask you one. Wait. Mike wants to ask.
Mike should go.
Yeah, let the Mike go. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. I've been waiting.
Sorry,
patiently.
Mike.
Don't.
You've been very polite.
I would just want to make a couple of points before I ask the question. First of all, you said that you made a point that all of us fell for one of these type of scams at one point or another when we were younger. Not true. Some of us didn't have the money to fall for them, because it could be $5,000 or $10,000 that you need to invest. That's a lot of hubcaps, buddy.
Sure.
So then, playing poker for pennies, no, that's goyish stuff. We didn't. We played for real money.
Mike, you did everything right. The rest of us are the losers.
No, Aaron. Listen to what I'm saying.
Baseball cards. With a piece of gum. Baseball cards.
No, I didn't do everything right. I don't think taking hubcaps is doing something right. And some people would argue playing poker isn't doing something right. But I did well at it, so why should I invest in these? Thirdly, we did have a market. We did have markets like that. You could say, coins, aside from their intrinsic value, if they had silver in them or something. But then you could say stamps, and of course there was the comic book thing. And I remember my grandfather used to deliver comics, so I got all the leftovers, and my brother and I had about 3,000 comics. And when we got old enough, my parents threw them out. And I said, Mom, Dad,
Yeah.
you know how many tens of thousands of dollars you threw out? And they said, if people like us didn't throw them out, they'd be worth nothing. So, which leads me to the question. This sounds like,
I mean, they're not wrong, actually, but
no, they're not wrong.
Yeah.
And the fact is, what this sounds like is just a form of a Ponzi scheme. Something has no
Ponzi light.
value. But when something has no intrinsic value of its own, even with comic books, you could say it could have sentimental value to somebody. There was the artwork, but when something has no intrinsic value, then you're trading it and dealing with it. And the people who make the money first are going to be the ones who make the money. Once the market is glutted,
so
to speak, there's nothing for anybody to make.
So you're right about that third tier, that Dogecoin, that crap. That's exactly like that. Bitcoin itself, because it has a mathematical model, is not really like that. I'm not saying it's great either, so don't take that. But I'm saying when you look at it structurally, it has a mathematical integrity to its model in how many Bitcoins can be issued and what it takes to divide them and to increase the stock of them. So there's a very and that's you. And so I think in a weird way, we almost should just say things like crypto and Bitcoin. We can't anymore. It's all been merged together. But crypto would be this really kind of lame gambling, sports betting like version. And then Bitcoin itself, which is one, right? It's actually one. And I'm not advocating that everyone has a bunch of Bitcoin. I will say this. If let's say you had a portfolio of, a 401k with $500,000, I would say having $5,000 in Bitcoin is probably not a terrible idea, 1% or 2%, right? Just because it's a little differently correlated asset, right? That's not going to kill you. And there is this upside potential because, and this is, I think, the key, because of that mathematical division of how many can get issued. So the scarcity is actually built into it. So that doesn't mean anyone should have 50%. You'd be out of your mind. But if you had 1%, 3%, something like that, that would be fine. And maybe you were more of a computer-oriented person, so maybe 5 or 10% would even make sense. But you wouldn't want to have anything more than that. And that would only be Bitcoin because of its hyper-transparent mathematical model, right? The other ones are not like that. They're literally are just that's why they're called memes, right? They are literally Ponzi's. I mean, they're like, actually, no, Ponzi's have some integrity to them, at least in the scheme. Memes are literally just like if we just did drawings right now and I'd say, oh, Alex, I'll pay $5,000 for your drawing, right? And then you don't even send it to me, right? It's like that's sort of what the meme stuff is. So I separate those two things.
Well, but the thing is, if you look at dollar is only as strong. Like your dollar bills that you have in your pocket are only as strong as the country that's backing them up.
Sure.
Right. So in other words, that dollar bill itself has no intrinsic value otherwise it's just a piece of paper printing it. So what I'm saying is that if a country, collapses, like one large country may be doing right now, then that paper money is toilet paper. So
well, it's not because there are. So I mean, this is where we get a little too, off the rails sometimes. Is that the U.S. dollar? So most people don't know this, that there's more U.S. dollars held outside the United States than there is inside the United States, right? So U.S. dollar has a special place in financial instrumentation. And my argument is if we didn't have the US dollar, we'd create the US dollar. Like in a weird way, it's sort of like the Roman currency, right?
That's
Like you.
That's what
Well,
Keynes. That's his idea for the Bancor, which would
Okay.
be a national.
Alex, you've had your say. The idea is, but it's an IOU.
Yeah.
A
Totally.
dollar
Of course it is.
It's essentially a marker. So
That's right.
Okay. Which brings me to my issue, which hasn't been brought up. The thing is this, Aaron. Go ahead, Mike.
Wait. Let me finish the.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
The So basically, yeah, you could say it has value because other people have it, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a difference between an intrinsic value. For instance, when we were backed up by gold, okay, gold had an intrinsic value because, first of all, gold has a usefulness.
Yeah, but it's like its industrial usefulness is a value that is priced into product only to a very limited degree. Most of our definition of, so it was great to get off the gold standard. Most people don't understand that. Like we would have really been in trouble if we stayed on the gold standard. It was unsustainable actually to stay on the gold standard.
Right. Okay.
So
I know.
yeah.
But
So we've gone to an ephemeral valuation model since Brenton Woods and coming off the gold standard, which everyone has for obvious reasons, because gold has a finite amount of gold on the planet, and you would be creating such a strange scarcity model that would be independent of its industrial value, right? You wouldn't want, so there's a lot of industrial applications that are necessary that gold is required, and it has a functional price to those applications that if you raise the price based on the scarcity of gold because you make it your financial instrumentation system, you would jack the price up 100x or 1000x, and then you couldn't use gold in those applications. It doesn't make sense to have a missile cost $350,000 and the gold in the missile costs $4 million and the gold in the missile is 5 grams, right? Like that world doesn't make any sense, right? So you were always going to collapse out of the gold market. Like that was just structural. So I just put a link in here for just Bitcoin, nothing else. So Bitcoin, and this is not, and I'm not some pro flag waver for Bitcoin. I'm just looking at it as another instrument. So there is about 20 million Bitcoins in existence. There's about 1 million left to be mined. They mine about 450 a day, and they've issued about 95% of them. So that's basically the scarcity in the model that is built off of a mathematical model, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, but here the question is, if and this is why I brought up the point about some people not having the money to invest in those things at the beginning. If somebody is a relatively poor person, and they get $1, that $1, they'll be able to use that $1 now, and they'll be able to use it probably as long as the country exists. All right. Yep. We all know what happened in Germany in the 20s, when they had to go with the old saying, with barrels full of money just to buy a loaf of bread.
Yep.
Yeah. But the idea is, as long as that exists, that $1's worth something. The Bitcoin and this whole crypto thing seems to be a lot more temporary. The impression I'm getting, it's a lot more temporary and a lot more, shall we say, insecure than $1.
Well, I would say crypto is. Bitcoin is less, primarily because of its survivability now after 16 years, and its math has not changed. And the holders, right, that you look at that link, those 19 million issued Bitcoins that people hold, right? So you multiply that times the price of Bitcoin today, and that's how much that Bitcoin is actually worth by the holders of it. And then you're issuing 450 new a day, and those 450 are issued through a process called mining. And what mining is you run these programs against these computers that are then take a long time, typically weeks and months, to process to create a single Bitcoin. and then you have a price of mining, which is supposed to equal the price of the Bitcoin. That's basically the theory of it, right? So, so that holds after 15 years. So that doesn't mean I believe the world should be Bitcoin. It actually doesn't make any sense, right? It's only 3 trillion. It's just, I actually look at Bitcoin as just a modern age version of gold, really, in some ways. That's it. Except it doesn't have an application like gold has. Like gold has an industrial application and a an application in jewelry and stuff.
Okay. So here's the thing that I'm looking at. I would think, and again, I'm not going to learn about this because there's 100 things to learn about. It's very complicated. But the thing is, well, the 2 things. Isn't anybody using prime numbers as in this field with crypto? You buy a prime number. There's only one of them. There's a limited number of prime numbers, and it's mathematically generated.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that, right? So, so the models are built off of a constraint in the number of potential issuable coins, and then the price of the coin is how long and how much it takes you in computing power to generate that coin, and that number has been slowly going up over 15 years.
Okay,
so you guys,
I'm saying it's like when you play poker. If somebody comes in and they've got enough cash to overwhelm everybody, they could, nobody can bluff them out. They got more money. So this is a very sophisticated tool, and it seems to me it will create a greater increase in the disparity of rich and poor, because the people who can deal with it are going to manipulate it and and acquire more assets.
Yeah, my take on this,
the truck driver isn't.
Yeah, my take on this is a lot like you mentioned comic book and baseball card and collectibles and that space.
Okay.
That market is very similar in that the people who were smart enough, lucky enough, had enough kind of fortitude and balls to go for it, and probably irrationally were buying, Joe DiMaggio cards in the 90s instead of a house or a new car, or got divorced or whatever, because they were all in on something that seemed decades away or never, or kind of absurd. Those ones won. Most of those people rarely sell those collectibles. They borrow against them, or if they sell them to acquire another group of similar high-powered collectibles. Yes, they stay inside that collectible ecosystem, which is basically what these. So there's a pile of, thousands of these, what you want to call Bitcoin millionaires, hundreds, probably actually tens of thousands of millionaires, thousands worth deca millions, hundreds worth hundreds of millions, and probably a few dozen worth a billion or two. But they're not a billion or two until they start selling them, right? And they are only, and because they're collectible. So imagine if your friend was since most of us here are at least, mid-late 50s to 70s. So imagine you had a friend going back to the 1960s, and he saved every fucking baseball card. And not just the card, he bought the boxes from all of those different companies, because when I was growing up, they were already consolidated, like in the 70s and 80s. So you only had the 3 big companies, where I know you guys growing up, there was like 9 companies, 10, 12, 15 companies making cards. They only came out for a year or 2 or 3. Imagine he kept all of those, and they're all brand new in the box. He wouldn't sell those, right? Those cards, those boxes would be worth millions, right? In some cases, hundreds of thousands in many cases. So, and if he did sell them, he would only sell them for another collectible that is in the associated space. He'd sell them for Joe DiMaggio's final bat and glove and jersey signed by Frank Sinatra, blah, 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 worth $500,000, right? Like he would only be staying in that inner collectible space. Maybe pay some taxes, peel off some stuff, buy, build his kitchen in Florida or whatever he'd be doing, because he'd be living there, I'm sure. And so that, but you follow what I mean? So that kind of
absolutely,
Bitcoin,
absolutely.
That kind of Bitcoin owner is staying a Bitcoin owner, only selling. And actually what you find, just like that collectible, these people dramatically live way under their wealth because their whole wealth stack is in this stuff, and they never want to sell it because they're and if your buddy was this super collectible guy, you'd be like, dude, you've got like 200 million in this shit, why don't you start living? Be like, no, the market's not peaked yet. Horace Wagner, you'd be like, dude, you're gonna be dead. Why do you care? Like, enjoy. And they almost have a psychosis in some ways. Like they almost care more, like hoard. They hoard these assets. And that's one reason why this is a made market, is there is a robust group of hundreds of thousands of people who have committed themselves, just like you have in the collectible market, right? Like, I guarantee you guys, the asteroid could hit and the market for whatever there are, 2 or 3 signed Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Lou Gehrig baseball card, when remade out of the asteroid, will start to have value because people will value that because of the nostalgic collectible value of it, right? So the collectible market will just stay alive. So that's because there's this core group that's, assuming they all don't die in the asteroid hitting, they care more about this than they do about buying a bigger house or buying blah 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 or going on fancy trips, buying a yacht.
Right. I see. We see a lot of that with antique or
that's right,
special cars.
That's right.
Rods,
But one point of information but then that's intrinsic value. If it means something to someone,
that's a fair point. So Bitcoin has intrinsic value because the culture that's created in it, just like we're history nerds. Like, I'll give you a good example here. Most of us don't have anyone else to talk to in our real lives about this kind of shit. That's why we're here. So if you offered your wife or your niece or your sister a first edition Napoleon signed blah 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 book, you'd look at it and be like, whatever. We would be here banking off for hours at its insanity, trying to get Jim would get 5 people who are expert writers about it and expert Providence people. So we care about that. Most normal people think of it as just some old shit, and I'm sure it's worth something to someone. That's literally what they would say. They wouldn't be like, oh, I looked on the Christie's and the Sotheby's and this and that, and it's worth $4 million, and the last auction was $1.5 million in 1990.
Yeah.
No one would care. No one would care. And so you could argue the Bitcoin. So it's weird. The Bitcoin at the top end and this junk end, this kind of party scamming kind of and multi-level marketing end, they have cultural value. And the cultural value on the scamming side is like all scams. Who can be the last one? Who's the first one out? And who's the sucker?
Yeah.
And can I time this the right way? Do I spread my risk every time I hear, oh, this one's popping, the blah blah blah, the dog hair one, boom, I jump in, hopefully it pops, a bunch of people jump in, I jump out before it crashes. Oh well, I believe most of that's going to get regulated over the next
so you don't
5
see any
years.
You don't see any political or social threat of any significance right now.
No. I mean, look, if Bitcoin got to $1 million, it gets weird because then the asset class is worth 30 trillion. And that starts moving into the super big leagues. It's in the big leagues now, but it's not in the super big leagues, right? Because when you start talking about tens of trillions for an asset class, there's only a handful of those on Earth, right? I mean, you have basically real estate, you have corporate stocks, corporate bonds, you have government bonds, you have
land,
cash, technically, well, real estate and land. That's what I associated with. And then you have basically a bucket of alternatives put together, like art and gold and whatever, like this grab bag of stuff. That's like another one worth 10 trillion. So if Bitcoin is its own 10 trillion there or 30 trillion, then things get weird because then there's almost no way that you will not have a massive taxing structure on it. And that's where things will get weird, because this group is very religious about their sort of almost, God-given, or the crypto God-given right that this is my asset and I'm independent of the world, blah, 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 and I shouldn't get taxed. And that's when, and by the way, once you're taxed, well, then they got to figure out how you tax this. Do you tax it by like real estate? Like you pay the tax once you sell it,
Right.
and you have a capital gains tax?
So they're like sovereign citizens.
Yeah. So my view is that in the next, if crypto prices go up 3 to 10x, then you will get a little bit of a social war around the taxes in it. Because the numbers will matter. Right now, the number's at 3 trillion. I mean, it's a big number, but you spread that around the whole world, and how many people really sell this. And by the way, I do believe that it's pretty hard to generate wealth taxes, because you are forcing sales, and that tends to depress markets, right? Especially when everyone has to do it at the same time, because that's when the tax bill comes. So then people figure out how to game that. So I've always believed in that traditional model of capital gains, right? You sell your house, you sell your stock, you sell your bond, right? Or your CD, you cash it in and you made your 5% on it. You pay your capital gains that year in that fiscal year, right? Like the calendar year, I should say. That sort of makes sense. I believe that's likely to be the model here, which means it's not going to be defined as a commodity. It'll be defined more as like a weird version of like a security and like a piece of real estate. It'll have some funky hybrid there, but it'll ultimately be down to, when you sell it, you got to pay your tax. There's no way around it. Like that's going to be the next big shoe to drop. And I could see Trump doing his version of no no taxes on tips and Social Security bullshit, but like nobody's really going to do this for an asset class this big. Doesn't make any sense, right?
Okay.
Because the other thing is it's going to create all the wrong incentives, because then people are going to say, well, shit, let me sell my real estate, buy crypto with it, park it there for a year, and then, I sell it and I don't pay taxes, right? Like, you're just going to get, like, that'll happen one time and then they'll pass law, right? Like it always happens like this, right? So that's kind of my view, is ultimately this gets capital gains tax, which, by the way, these collectors, by the way, collectors have to pay capital gains. One of the reasons they don't sell this shit is they hate taxes. These people, how many people die, like these rich collectible people? Like a good example is, what's his name from took over for David Letterman, that's got his like 600 car collection, famous Jay Leno. Yeah, Jay Leno. So Jay Leno's gonna die without selling all his cars because he doesn't want to pay taxes, which is fine. But Jay Leno has so much fucking money with cars, he could like literally buy like 20% of NBC. And then he could buy fucking 10,000 cars if he wanted to, right? So it's almost an irrationality that they do this. And my view is a whole bunch of these people this is going to happen to them with crypto, because they don't want to pay the taxes.
Okay.
And that's gonna be this permanent constraint that's going to keep this market, elevated. At least crypto. I mean, at least Bitcoin. The rest of this stuff, I think, is just chaos. I think that stuff's chaos.
Okay, you really wrapped it up pretty good, Aaron. Thanks. Mike, you don't have a closing word on that, right? You still got your hand up, but you're done.
To me, it still sounds, even with
Bitcoin,
Bitcoin,
it is, yeah.
It still sounds like a Ponzi scheme to a degree, in that, because the person, like you said, the person who sells it first. But the fact is that anything that's irrational in its nature probably isn't a good thing to base an economy on. So basically, what you seem to be saying is that this is not something that Trump or anybody else should go into full blast, at least not for the country.
No, not for the country, but I guarantee you the grift side of this is enormous for Trump and Musk, because they can use their elevated brand and their media presence through X especially, and do these perpetual pump and dumps, and they have the regulatory capture, right? They have the whole show, and they can do a zillion pump and dumps for the next 3-4 years. But I will say this, my prediction on this is that eventually, whether it's in 4 years or 8 years, whatever, there will be a tax bill. I mean, look, it's like Al Capone, man. It's shit always, you always get blasted by the tax man. They don't stop coming, right? Someday they could fire all these tax people today and this and that. Someday someone's going to forensically drill back through a lot of this pump and dump, and then you're going to get a Musk tax bill for 35 billion or whatever, right? And that's just, and look, Warren Buffett said it. I mean, so Warren Buffett paid the largest tax, he consistently pays the largest tax bill of any human in history every year. Like, he's basically paid more, he pays more in taxes every year than anybody. He pays usually tens of billions in taxes. So, you know, he said it. You know, he just said, like, everyone playing all these games, like, you're going to get a tax bill that's going to be a third of your enterprise value. You're going to have to sell your Tesla, or you're going to have to, you know, some huge existential risk. And that's kind of what I believe is going to happen to a lot of these guys. Because you know what it is? When you do this many transactions this fast, and you are, let's say, this loose about how you do these things, the due diligence, the structures, the vehicles you create, the kind of, you know, buy and sell and trade games you play with entities, like, you are blowing past all these tax treatment hurdles that eventually somebody goes back and starts saying, well, hey, you didn't file this, you didn't hold this long enough, you didn't do this, you sold this, didn't pay this tax, you know, like, it's just, here's the penalty. Like, there's just an inevitability to this that I think is happening. Now, I do believe Trump and Musk have a decent likelihood of generating a huge crypto boom that they try to benefit from, that probably goes parabolic. That's my guess. Just like every other thing they do like this. And I also think that Musk is trying to merge TikTok, Truth, and X into like a new Facebook. That's my sort of basic gut feel. I don't know if he's going to be able to pull that off, but I think that's my gut feel. And then that gives him this sort of peer to Zuckerberg kind of position. And then that becomes this other media channel that's out there. So, and I do think that's I give that like at least a 50% chance that's
okay.
What he's going to do.
It sounds like the only thing to do now is support Canada. That's it. There's my political pitch.
Okay. Well, we can all find a religion that's, you know, anti-currency, and, you know, lets us go to our past lives rather than our future lives. Go backwards in time. That'd be handy.
Look, the simplest thing is just buy S&P 500.
Yeah.
Don't get caught up in any of these cycles.
Oh, there's a very interesting reality in the stock market. You can make money as a bull, which is you want stocks to go up. You can make money as a bear. You want stocks to go down, but you always lose money if you're a pig.
Exactly.
You want to take too much.
Yeah. So my view is, I think people overcomplicate all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. You just, you know, if you've got a pension or Social Security, 401k, IRA, whatever.
I'm not really looking. I'm not talking about personal gain or loss. I'm just considering what effect it would have on society, because the people who have money to throw around, again, like, in other words, if you go looking for, I would be looking for income property about 10, 15 years ago, and you walk in and you say, how much is it? You say, well, it's sold. Some guys came in from China and they bought it for 85% of the asking price because they didn't want escrow. They say, here's the money, give me the property. So
That's right.
when people got big money, it's a different thing.
But I will say this,
that
that happens more and more in just desirable cities.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I don't mean this like these places are bad, right? Places like Columbus, Ohio are fantastic college towns. They're great cities. They're fun places. Actually, a cool place to live. It's a good life. Nothing wrong with them. But they're not this sort of global, cosmopolitan super cities. So those places always attract a certain generational cycle buyer, right? It used to be the Japanese,
old money.
Then it was.
Oh no.
Well, no,
I'm talking about New York. I mean LA. I'm talking about LA.
No, I hear you, but it used to be Gulf money, Iranian money, Chinese money, this money, that money, Brazilian. So what it is a handful of elites, a couple hundred or a few thousand at most, go into a market. They talk to each other. They status escalate on each other. I bought this. I bought this one. I bought this one, and I bought the super this one, and then it just fizzles out, right? Because ultimately, these people don't really live there, right? They buy it, they sell it to someone else. Most of the time, when you follow this stuff,
no. What I'm talking of is when you have enough chips to get into what does it cost to sit down at the table?
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that I'm concerned that Bitcoins and crypto is going to be something sophisticated and required that only people who can invent, only people who can afford to run a computer for 3 weeks.
So here's my take. The biggest change in wealth in the United States, in a good way, we never talk about the good way, is in the last 25 years, we went from about 15% of Americans having stock to almost 60% now, and on our way to 80-90%. And the amount of people who fully own their home is 38%, and the amount of people who are buying a home is another about 31%. So we get that 31% up to 41%. It gets close to 80% of people are in a owning home, and we get the owned homes up to 45-50%. And we get our stock ownership to 80-90%, you will have a lot more people in this country over the next 20, 30, 40 years that will have more generational wealth to pass to their kids, help their kids buy books or car at school or pay for half the tuition, whatever. Like, that's a very real thing that's going on. And whatever we've been doing, good or bad, financial crisis, COVID, Trump, 9/11, all this shit, like, still can't block that. That tells you the physics, the force of hundreds, eventually 300 million people having real estate and some stock, which generally speaking becomes generational, because the new instrument, and this is a big deal. This is I think the most transformative financial instrument in the last 50 years has been sort of created, and it has nothing to do with Bitcoin. So everyone here knows what a reverse mortgage is. It's how you screw your kids or grandkids or everyone else out of whatever your home is, because you get the money and then when you die, you walk away and everyone's like, God, that's it? The guy had nothing. I get his hoarded shit and then that's it, right? Like, you're done. Like, okay, I guess thanks, Dad, or thanks, Uncle. Well, the new instrument, which is a bank instrument now, is a family reverse mortgage. So your kids, so imagine you have 2 kids and they're like, hey, generational wealth, Dad, we want to keep this in the family. So we're going to do a reverse mortgage with Dad and Mom or whatever, whoever's alive, whatever family member. And then at the time that you pass away, that house passes to them. Here's the key to this. The reason that's such a big deal, that's a natural financial transaction. They don't get taxed on from an estate standpoint. That's a big deal. That's being done not by rich people. I mean, some rich people do that, but it's being done by a horde of middle-class people all over the country, especially in near urban areas. So that's like a big, so there are these shifts in what I call more equitable wealth happening underneath us that are very real. And is everyone participating? No, but a larger percentage of the population is than has ever participated. And in the next 20 years, you're going to see probably close to 80% of people living in a home they're buying, and probably 80% of people owning stock. I'm not saying that solves everything. It doesn't.
No, but
it's
definitely a good indicator.
It's a bigger, better indicator. Yeah,
but
it's better news.
That's all dependent. I mean, right now the middle class is slipping away.
I don't agree, actually. I actually don't.
Well, I'll put it this way. There are fewer people that could call themselves middle class.
Well, I have a take on this, Mike, and most people don't like this take, but I think it's pretty accurate. If you get married in this country in your 20s and 30s and stay married because you could and you got lucky and picked the right person, and ideally nothing happens to them or you health-wise, then your ability to stay middle class goes up, no offense to the basic math, by 2x, because especially in this modern world, if you're middle class, you're both, outside of maybe one of you taking a little bit of time off, having kids, maybe, you're both earning and working your whole life. And here's the big deal. You then both go into retirement collecting Social Security at your full invested Social Security. So whatever house you have, even if you just stayed middle class and didn't have a fancy job, one was a teacher, other one was, worked at a big electrical union for 40 years, whatever. So you retire, you both have whatever, retirement plan you were able to put together, but then you both get full Social Security at, $3-4 grand a month on top of your house that's probably paid off at that point. Kids are already out. You're pretty damn upper middle class by the time you hit retirement. So, and that's not some fancy people with fancy degrees here. This is pretty regular people. The key was they got married. So I think the real thing we don't talk about is we don't separate partnered up people, paired up, pair bonding up people from non-pair bonding up people, right? And if we want to be real, in the old days, a hell of a lot of, and that's why our divorce rate was so high. A hell of a lot of people got together because they had to. Because dad and mom kicked your ass out at 18, didn't give a flying fuck what happened to you. Like, good luck. Yeah, I mean, you're invited to holidays, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever. Your mom kind of cries once in a while when she sees you and slides $50 in your pants or whatever. But ultimately, your ass is on your own. And then you had an enormous amount of incentive with another person kicked to the curb to at least get together to survive. Today, for a lot of reasons, we don't have that financially, but we also don't have that socially, right? Like, people want to be with people they like and like them, and the whole dating market's changed. So about half the people never pair up. About another half do. The half that pair up, almost all are middle class in this country. So when you separate...
There's one thing wrong with that assessment, which is that if you go back pre-World War II or immediately after World War II, you did not have two, middle-class incomes in that household.
Yeah, agreed. That's 80 years ago. When you look at everything since 1970s and beyond, it's pretty straightforward that in the last 50 years, if you pair up in your 20s and 30s and stay paired up, then you are pretty, the percentage of people who aren't middle class in that group is absolutely tiny. So most of the people unpaired are a huge percentage of population because a lot of the chunk of those are single parents, right? So the moment you're unpaired and have kids, like, kaboom, right? Like things get pretty nasty pretty fast economically, right? So that's a dimension there we don't really talk about. So what we really have is a problem of unpaired people who need a lot more social support, like a much bigger earned income tax credit for them, right? Especially if they have kids, right?
And like also, that. Yeah, but also you have the fact that when both spouses, when a husband and wife are both earning the same amount of money, well, they have less reason to stay together. Especially since if the let's say one party feels they could be self-sufficient without the others, why should they put up with all the other garbage?
Yeah, no, so that's a fair point. And usually, so obviously if somebody really doesn't get along and is a bad fit, then they really shouldn't be together. I would argue probably that's true in 70% of people who divorce. I think there's like 30% of people who divorce who make a bad game theory decision. Like basically, they kind of think they think what you just said, but things aren't really that bad. But they're like, hey, I'm good. But then what happens is 3 years later, they lose their job. They takes 5 years to get back to where they were. And by the way, if they have no kids, tough shit. Like you made your wrong call. But if they have kids,
Yep.
then they get blasted, right? Because now they drop to lower middle class. They have to move. Those kids leave a good school district, go to a worse one, like, and especially if it went sideways with the other party, they remarried, that, and usually what you get is some weird shit where the party that quit got it worse, the party that got quit on remarried and doubled up, and now they're upper middle class, and it's kind of this funky train wreck, and then the resentments and all that stuff. So I think there's and this is an area we never like talking about because there's just so much is contingency here. And I think we think we're smarter than we are when we're paired. Like we think we're smarter about making these decisions. We don't get, in some ways, how lucky we are if we don't have someone that when we model our behavior with them, that actually provides us a pretty good foundation around us, and vice versa. Maybe they don't like how much you like sports, or maybe you don't like how much they, whatever bullshit they do. They play bridge or whatever, right? Like, and you can't listen to them when they talk about their reality TV. Like, who cares? If you can do whatever period of time, decades, and live on basically guaranteed upper middle class life with somebody else, or struggle middle class with the risk if something goes sideways, you're in lower middle class, which we know lower middle class living produces worse health outcomes, obviously, higher risk in crime and everything else around you, and all because what? You don't want to listen to blah 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 blah, they said, and they didn't want to listen to blah blah blah, you said. I mean, there's a lot there that we don't ever really like. And I'm not trying to throw some weird conservative morality play either. Like, this has nothing to do with that. This has to do with people at this sort of treating pairing up as significant as buying or leasing a car. Not realizing, imagine if you bought and leased the right car, you got a pretty strong guarantee of upper middle class for the rest of your life. How much more serious would we take friggin' that lease or that buying of that car? Really seriously, right?
Yeah,
and in some ways,
you're ignoring human nature, which is the grass is always greener. Or as
that's right.
My friend Colin Quinn used to say, he would say, "Hey guys, when you finally get the girl of your dreams, the girl you always dreamed of, the one girl that you always wanted, and you finally land her, and then you say to yourself, hey, if I can get her, I can get any woman."
Yeah, of course.
Is, unfortunately, a part of human nature. And, and also once somebody, the other part is when people start getting comfortable enough, they start saying, oh, well, I don't just have to take what I need. I can get what I want.
Yeah. No. Look, narcissism and arrogance and ego, any pair. And by the way, I really do think a huge part of the non-paired market. So by the way, people don't get this. Divorce rates have come down. And you know why? Because less people are getting married because they don't have to anymore, right? And they don't want to, and they're not a good fit. So in a weird way, this world of newer, healthier, more equal freedom between men and women and men and everybody else is that basically a whole bunch of people who shouldn't get married don't anymore. And so the divorce rate is, so right now it's about 70% of marriages stick. And that always used to be 40 or 50%. And by the way, those numbers used to be even lower because we like to pretend about how good the 30s, 40s, and 50s were. But in the end, there was a shit ton of dudes that just bailed, but the wives never got divorces because that wasn't cool to do in culture, or they could lose a benefit or this or that, or their parents wouldn't agree with it or whatever. So the truth was our divorce rate or our separation rate was more like 70% or more. And now it's flipped the other way where it's about 30%. And to be fair, the 30% that separate, a much higher percentage, both legally because of how serious we take garnishment and paying your child support and whatever. Like that was a joke 50 years ago. Now it's not. Now your world gets body slammed if you screw that up, right? They come after you, get fired, like they come after your money. I mean, it's real. So, which is good. I think that's great. So you're in a better world with the people who do get married. And by the way, I think you're in a better world relationship wise for the people who don't, but they're in a worse world economically. And the trade-off is this: if you are unwilling to adjust your behavior to pair up with someone, the odds that you're going to have a weaker economic life is much higher. And I think it's really that simple. And that's not a moral play. I just think it's reality. And I don't think we can play some games and help people with earned income tax credit, and especially if they have kids, things like that, or they have anyone that's disabled or whatever they're taking care of. But outside of that, we can't legislate you not being an asshole on a date when someone should like you if you just shut up and you have a decent shot of pairing up, right? We can't legislate that fix. That's impossible. But as my friend used to say, if your parents can't fix you, how the hell is anyone else going to fix you?
Well, yeah.
And in the end, there's just and by the way, this is the big thing. We're almost up to about 50% of the population under 50 is unpaired, right? So this is one of the biggest drivers of our inequity is unpaired versus paired. And we don't have some simple answer. That's fair, because the paired people don't want to be like, well, shit, if we give all the incentives to be unpaired, why, you know what I mean? Like you'll just iterate your way to that outcome. So you can't,
Well, we are spoiled. In other words,
yes,
in the old days, you pair up with somebody, you say, well, who can I tolerate?
And also I need to pay bills. She needs to pay bills, or he needs to pay bills. And like you said, who do I tolerate? Like, do they have a good job? Are they nice? Are they clean? And by the way, what we used to use as a proxy, which probably isn't too wrong still, is how nice are they to their parents and to other people, right? That was sort of the old school proxy. That was sort of like, well, if you did, it's hard to be that and be a sociopath. Like then you're really a sociopath, actually, at that point. So if you're nice to other people and you're clean, as whatever your definition of that is, and you have a job, odds are you're. And the truth is, in the modern era, outside of the attraction piece, that's probably not the worst metrics. Like if you had to tell, like you had a niece, grandniece or something, or niece, and she said, what should I look for, this and that? Like you could just say, look, is he or she nice to their, to other people they meet? They hold doors for people. They're nice. They're sweet. They're clean. They have a nice job. They're somewhat organized. They don't drink. They don't do crazy stuff. Let's say that is out of your crazy league, whatever that means. That's probably not the worst thing you could say, and that probably hasn't changed much in 60, 70 years.
Well, that's an ideal situation, Aaron, because a lot of people want excitement, and excitement also.
Well, that's the problem. So my brother, who's been married multiple times, loves drama. I hate drama, and I can't do drama. I can't. I just don't have I have zero tolerance for it, and I think that's an issue. Is some people have a narcissism that they think action equates to excitement, and I guess it does at some basic level, but ultimately, don't be shocked if your pair outcomes aren't as successful as others who are, let's say, more boring. And I think that's sort of what we're, and by the way, this leads ultimately economically to less healthy outcomes. Because if you are trading excitement for stability, then just by nature, if you model this out like on a graph, you're going to have more volatility. And that volatility is going to be economic volatility. Forget your own personal mind, social stuff. because everything, you know, let's be real, when people are with people and this and that, like they quit jobs, you know, they buy houses, they do all this crazy shit, which blows up, and they put themselves in holes that take sometimes decades or half a decade to dig out of, that if they had stability, the boring, stable people just do this linear regression slowly up to upper middle class. Right? Like,
but we live in a society in which we're pumped with this need for excitement. So you have movies which are solely action. We have the
agreed
rides, you know, and so it's a kind of societal thing that we have here. It's not just with marriages. People are pumped up to say, I've got to have constant excitement. And like you said, constant excitement is not.
I mean, what's fascinating in cities, especially these big cosmopolitan cities, the cool cities, is the marriage rates have basically imploded in these places because you're surrounded by permanent optionality. There's always a more interesting new person, there's novelty, whatever. These second and third tier cities, you find the matching rate explodes. Because basically people are going to those places to find people who meet a minimum requirement they have. It's like a software specification almost. It's like, hey, if I'm just making this up, say Midwest. If you're in the Midwest and you move to Cincinnati, in the new inner city, not inner city like hood, but like they call it inner city, which is this new build out. It's really awesome. The stadiums are there, restaurants, all this crap, you know, right by the river, all this stuff. So if you live there, like you've made a choice to be cooler than others. And then when you meet people there, they're making a similar choice. There's a matching algorithm in some ways going on by those choices people make. So they know they're not in New York. They know they're not in LA or Chicago. They know they're in the city they're actually in. So they know the optionality is limited, not zero, but it's limited. So they're not now some people are, but most are not stupid about that selection process, because they know if you got this far, 5 dates, 10 dates in, you like each other, you seem to still like want to be around each other more than you did in the beginning of meeting each other, while you learn more, then the odds are you probably are about as good of a match as you're going to get. At best, what are you replacing it with? Waiting another year, 6 months, 3 years, whatever, to get back to what you just got to, if you're lucky. So those smaller cities tend to have very high match rates. And what's weird is and this is why I think the world is what it is. I think the people living in big cosmopolitan cities that are single are there because they want to be, right? Like they really don't want the matching. And whether that's your kid or this or that or your niece or your nephew, whatever, it's just who they are. Now, maybe they tumble into a match because there's some other driver, right? Maybe they are religious or, whatever, culturally religious. They're Jewish or Eastern Orthodox or whatever. They go to that, church, that temple, that mosque, and that's kind of their connection. And then eventually they get kind of, topple, match made in heaven, kind of, slapped together like a sandwich and move on, conveyor belt. Like there's still a little bit of that out there in those cosmopolitan cities like LA and stuff, but it's very little. It's very little. Most people in these cities that are single like the lifestyle of, they're trading the boring suburban lifestyle of being with someone every day for the excitement of being in a big cosmopolitan super city, LA, New York, Chicago, Toronto, London, Tokyo, whatever. And then people living in these second and third tier cities are not. Like you go move to Sacramento, which the greater Sacramento area is really neat. I mean, you have Stockton, Davis, you've got Tahoe, you got Reno, you got all the far north, Eastern California. It's a great place. It's actually a beautiful place. Your chances of matching up are probably 5 times higher than LA. Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
And the same thing's true in New York. The same thing's true in New York. Like if you leave New York City and go to the capital cities area, which is Albany, Saratoga, all those cool, really beautiful, I mean, gorgeous towns up there, right? Like your match, the population is 1,000 times smaller, but your match rate is going to be much higher. And it goes back in a weird way. This is sort of my contention. When you go to these smaller, not tiny, you can't be tiny, but smaller cities, smaller, like almost greater city areas, you're sort of fake recreating the 1960s and 70s of your parents kicking you to the curb with the good love knowledge. Well, you're going to find somebody else who's going to take care of you now more than I will. That's sort of what they were doing, whether they said it explicitly or not. That was sort of what it was. And if that worked out 1 out of 2 times, then well, whatever, like you got going, right? So in a weird way, you're recreating that necessity to match in those smaller city areas, which the big cities are the exact opposite.
Well, there's other factors. There's other factors too.
Yeah,
other factors like big things that are going on in China and Japan, where they have lower fertility rates.
Yep.
But if you don't get married by the time you're 35, forget about
Yep.
it.
Yep.
But the other thing is with the big cities, specifically New York and LA, you got the people that want to be celebrities that want to go for the top dollar, and so they get extracted from from Ohio and all over the country, and they're there in their career.
Yep.
They're actors or
or traders, financial or tech or whatever.
Right. They're going to play the big game.
Yeah.
And
I have to tell you,
and if you're playing a big game like that, like I've got nieces and nephews, a lot of people I know are multimillionaires, but they're because they work, their hedge funds or whatever.
Sure.
And I got a niece who's got 3 kids, but she's got a full-time nanny.
Yep.
Who's raising the 3 kids.
Yeah, of course.
She's working for one of those.
She's working 90 hours a week.
Yeah, well,
she's basically firms, a guy in 1980s is what she is.
Yeah.
Objectively, like if you looked at a trader in 1980s, that's who she is. She just happens to be a woman, which is a great thing. Women too can be bad parents now, as amazingly rich people, and then try to buy off the fix.
Well, they're not 2 women. She's living in Dumbo somewhere on the 27th floor. But the thing is, but that becomes, and I know when I was working, work becomes the essential thing you're doing.
That's right.
The family's just, dinner and take, okay, great.
But because here's the thing. When you're in that.
No. I think the magic is this on a personal thing. This is, I'm not talking numbers now, but I'll just take a real fast story. I had a friend, a girl, and she says, the guys they don't see me. They just bump into me and keep walking. I can't find a guy. And I said, here's what you got to do. Find somebody who you can help.
Yes.
Somebody you can support. Stop looking for the guy who's wearing fancy shoes and he's going to do this for you and that for you and he's the right height. Forget about what you need. Find somebody that needs you.
So here's the
and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Because in a marriage, you've been married for quite a while, right?
Yeah. Well, I was my kid's late mom passed away, so I raised my kids since they were young. But I was married.
While you were married, so you went through a tragic thing.
You
have to not be concerned about, you got the right kind of motorboat you want.
That's right.
You 100%. Have to be concerned about the others.
That's right.
You have to.
On
a real level,
this is the problem. This is the real problem structurally, though. And this has been my point, is that there's a whole bunch of people who really aren't built for pairing and partnering.
Yeah.
However it happened, maybe they were the 3rd kid, it's genetic, it's the social environment, but I kind of never believe that either, because sometimes you'll meet 3 brothers and 2 are like really cool and the other one's an asshole, and you're sort of like, well, you can't blame mom and dad on that one, right? Like, obviously that's just maybe you, right? And so there's just, you remember, we're a unique species. Very few mammals, almost none, have 8.5 billion mammals, right? So you just statistically get mutation, and out of 8.5 billion, you're going to get about 10, 20, 30 million that are sociopaths and that are all broken up, which in other species, they would just let them die off.
You're even going to find people who buy Bitcoins, you know.
That's right. Exactly. And so my point is that I think ultimately a bunch of people sub-select themselves for places to prioritize how they want to live and then live in that stack. Right. And if you said to your niece, hey, hun, you make whatever, 800 grand a year and you got 10 million, you got more than enough money. I can get you a job at JP Morgan in Columbus, Ohio. It's 450 grand a year, because that's where one of their headquarters is, Columbus, Ohio. It's a big, they're a customer of mine. And I can get you a job at 450 grand a year. You sell your shit in New York, or you rent it out, whatever. You go buy a monster house for 1.5 million or something, like 2 million max. And you live a fantastic life with a whole bunch of community of neat people. You can get your inner this, that, Jewish, this, that, blah, blah, blah. Masons, who gives a shit? Your flower pot committee. She would look at you and be like, over my dead body, my life is here in New York. And what she really means is her priorities are in New York, not what we believe is a success paradigm of community.
Yeah, but
her version of that community.
But they'll want to go to, you know, actually they go to, it's an island in the Bahamas. It's
sure.
It's got two names.
St. Thomas?
Everybody goes there.
St. Thomas, St. John?
Turkish.
Okay. Turks and Caicos.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I go.
That's where they go. They go there, they go there, they go there.
Yeah, so
I gotta tell you something. Yeah, I gotta tell you something, guys. First of all, Aaron, as to your small city thing, I have to say that I go very often to Winnipeg. Sometimes I spend a week there.
Cool town. I love Winnipeg. It's a really neat town.
Right, great. And it's a mid-sized city.
Yep.
Right.
It's cool. The people are awesome. Sports proud. I mean, they're just nice.
Oh, they're great. And I've met women there.
Yep.
And I can tell you that I've met, you know, some really nice women.
Yep.
And the not one of them went out with me because they said, "Hey, if I want to New York, I'll go to New York. I'm fine. What do I need?"
Well,
so it doesn't always. But the thing is.
But here's the deal: you didn't move there. Like if you really went for it for a year in Winnipeg, like for real, just sucked it up, rented your place in New York.
I would do it in an instant. I can't.
Yeah.
But the fact is, because you know you have to have residency there, etc.
Sure. No, I get it. But like if you could, then your New Yorkness becomes a novelty because you're really all in on Winnipeg. Like you're in. And then of course your inner New Yorkness gives an advantage because all those restaurants and pool chefs and bartenders that most people are, let's say, either take for granted, a little too lazy or scared to become buddies with as a New Yorker, especially, but even someone from LA, you just have more like, fuck it, let me roll. And then you become buddies. You become the center of gravity. It doesn't cost you anything. Just nice to people and invite them to your place every few weeks while you're cooking the same shit anyways. Just add 20% to what you're making and boom, you have friends, right? Like the shit isn't rocket science, right? I mean, and so eventually people just start saying, oh, Mike, right? Like you become a verb and everyone knows like Mike from New York, you know, which is this guy that now lives in Winnipeg. And I'm just using you as this sort of example, but anybody who does that is highly likely to increase their social proof, as all this is called, dramatically. Like
temporarily, Aaron, because after a while it wears off. You know.
No, I get it, but remember, you're not Genghis Khan. You don't need 90 women. You're looking for 1 to 3 that you could do a low, medium, high probability sort function on in your game theory. And you close one and they close you. I mean, like, so the success funnel is not like, and I would argue that's the problem in these big cities. They don't look at the success function as getting the funnel down to 1 or 2 or 3. It's this permanently wide, you know, recharging of 90 people every year. And everyone else is doing that to them too. So it's like it's a law of large numbers problem is what it is. Because it becomes 90 times 90, and that just eats itself, you know, to the third power. And then everyone's just like, you know, like you're on your way to a date in New York or LA, and you and you're dressed up nice and this and that. You catch the eye of 5 others, maybe talk to one. So you're going into your date already half out the bag. And so she, you know, and it's like, and then it's like, you know, a bunch of is going on all the time. And there's always better optionality. In Winnipeg, it's like, you know, that cool bar you go to, that the bartender and you are buddies, and you know, the chef and the line cook, and you guys go after hours to the little jazz jam session place, and you see this person and you say, hey man, who's that? You know, and everyone knows, oh yeah, that's, you know, that's Mary, you know, she went to blah 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 high school, you know, Winnipeg North, you know, I went to, you know, I worked with her brother. It's like, oh, is she with someone? No, I don't think anymore. Let me find out. And then pretty soon, like, you make a run almost like you're in high school and college, is what's great about those smaller towns. It actually has more achievability for both parties now, especially men and women, that in big cities, like instantly, like if you just walk up to someone in a big city, like creep, you know, rapist, psychopath, like what are you doing? You know, people are just not geared to someone, even passing conversation, right? It's just awkward. Right, like I was at the, you know, I'm on the west side of LA now, and so I was over at on the Ralph's at Olympic, and there was just some people there, nothing serious, and I was just making some light or just, you know, some whatever conversation, and you could just tell they were like, one was in a zone, like it just got all like weird, freaked out, like ran away almost with their cart, and the other one was kind of like mumbling because they're like all in their own headset thing. And the third one, you know, was like nice, but you could tell was sort of like, what do you want? And it's just like, you know, just being nice in the vegetable section. How about that? Like, you know, and because that's like called human. But you could, whereas if you're in another place, you know, you're likely, you know, if you go to the, what's the big grocery store chain up in Canada? The, huh?
Grocery store chain?
Yeah. Shoot, I know the chain.
But yeah, if you go to the market, you're just saying. I mean, I know people who met each other in a couple who met each other in a market in Winnipeg, and you're right. You're right. The idea of there being fewer options means you focus on each other.
Yeah, exactly. What do you call allotments? Yeah, like
oh, that's right. So it's like two like I don't know, let's say 2 tigers meet, and you know, and there's only, that's it. You met them.
That's it. That's right.
It's not, you're not in a cage with 500 lions.
Exactly. What do you call it?
There's more social cohesion when there's more scarcity.
Well, we used to have a saying in New York. Well, some of us had a saying in New York, which is that you're more likely to hook up with a girl who's from New York, who was born and raised in New York, than you would than somebody who came to New York, because the women that came to New York came there for the excitement.
Yep.
Right.
You know, they weren't stuck with it. But it also seems like what you're saying is that people probably should, on the whole, get married or hook up later when they've had the excitement of their youth, and maybe they're looking for more stability.
Well, the only way that works is if they're honest enough that that's what they're doing, not that they're just punting the whole time, and then they were never serious about getting serious. Because I think one of the things, and I've seen this with my kids, right? My oldest is getting married in June. She's turning 30 in May. And my youngest is 26, going on 27, and she's in a serious relationship too, probably married in another 2-3 years. And I saw kind of their evolution and their friends, right? Because I know all their friends from growing up as little kids to high school, college. And I see the matching rate in that 20s to early 30s age is very high, obviously. I mean, we always knew that, but it's still high. And I think when you miss that cycle, you're now in this, and it's just obvious, you're now in a different statistical market because of the volume there, right? Because most people in their 20s to early 30s aren't matching up with people in their 40s to 60s, obviously. They're staying inside that little cohort. But once you miss that and you go into your 30s, your range increases, which means your competition increases too. So now you're in this much bigger swath of the population. So what you find is people who are in their 20s to early 30s, they don't have a 7-year difference in age. It's 1, 2, 3 years. It's very, very tight. Right. But people in their 30s to 40s, those ranges start to grow, let's say 3 to 9 years.
Like Macron.
Exactly. Well, that's the other way in his case.
But also, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. The, a 39-year-old woman is going to be more, well, actually, I know.
39 is TikTok.
Well,
30.
Well, that's another factor.
TikTok.
Well, it depends if she has kids. If she has kids already, it's not.
Oh, if they have kids already, then they're divorced.
And they're looking, and women are looking for more stability, which means they would probably get an older man because men mature more slowly than women. But there's the other factor, which is I know some women in their 20s who don't want men. These are women that, obviously, because that's who I'm looking at. But the idea is that there are women in their 20s who don't want men in their 20s or 30s. They want because they want their wisdom. In other words, they need.
But you know what? But that's a small percentage.
They want that.
But that's a small percentage, guys. That's like a tiny percentage. The majority, socially, it's like, look, a woman or a guy, doesn't matter, but let's say it's a woman who's 27, who's dating a 51-year-old guy. She is only bringing him around to a handful of friends who can understand this. She's not like your normal 25 to 35-year-old fun party where everyone's sort of in the same cohort. Dad isn't showing up to that party. That's weird, right? I'm not saying this is right, like at a human, humanist moral level, but I'm saying like what really happens in social physics. And so it's a tiny cohort of women in their 20s or into their early 30s who date substantially older, let's say more than 9 years older than they are. That's a tiny percentage because they're just, they don't share anything. They're,
Let me just, I'm going to leave this on so you guys can close up. But I sent you my phone number and stuff. Well, I'll talk to you in the morning. And we'll get together. Are you booked tomorrow?
No, I'm around tomorrow. If you want to do, let me check here my calendar. Let's see. Yeah, if you want to do like a coffee or something, or breakfast kind of thing. I don't know what your schedule is. I was going to go over to the Hammer Museum, but that's about it tomorrow. But yeah, so
good. You go to places like the Hammer.
I'm sorry.
Before you guys go into this arrangement thing, because I'm afraid I can't make it. I can't catch a plane that fast. But no, I think it's almost midnight, so we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, you're tired of that.
I think I'd prefer we come over and breakfast in my house. I'll make breakfast.
Or we can just go over to a local place, get some coffee. I like to sit outside and just do stuff here.
Well, I got a backyard.
All right, so so give me a. I didn't get your text, so text me.
It.
You did?
I did. I sent it to your phone number. Yeah.
All right. Hold on.
I also wanted to say for you, Aaron.
Yes.
Don't worry about it. Ken is a much nicer guy in real life. I know that's not
No, I know you're a nice guy. So wait, hold on. I didn't get your text. Hold on. So 646-303-0497.
Let me see where I sent it to. I sent it to. Why doesn't it show me the?
I don't think you pushed.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I might have sent it to a wrong person or something.
You probably did.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Okay, so let me just give you my number. I'll talk to you. I mean,
Okay. Here, I'll just dial you. Yep. 210. Wait, hold on.
310.
310. Yep. 310.
402.
402.
4089.
4089. All right. Here we go. And then I just called your number. You should see my number. And then that's it.
There it is. Here it
okay,
comes.
good. All right, good.
So I'm not going to answer that.
No, don't answer. Okay, good. And then Mike, and I forgot, Mike, you live where in the city in New York?
I live in Queens, around Regal Park.
Oh, nice. Okay, so when I get back, I'm getting back at the end of March. We should all get together. Like I did a dinner with Alex and Frank and Jim and a bunch of these guys about a year ago, which they're really good Chinese. There's a great pan Chinese place that's basically right by the GW bridge, but we can go somewhere else. We can do Astoria, Queens. We can, go over. There's a great Uzbek place,
Yeah, there's plenty of those around me. But actually, every Thursday night, as Ken can attest to, because when he was in New York, he was there. We meet at a diner, a whole bunch of us.
So where do you live in New York? Where do you live in New York, Aaron?
No, I live in North Jersey. I live in North Jersey.
Jersey, right? Not near Sussex, right?
No, I live 5 minutes from the George Washington Bridge. I live in
Teaneck. Okay.
A town called Teaneck.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's Teaneck, Inglewood, Fort Lee, which is right at the bridge.
I don't know why all this talking you were doing, you threw me back to like the girls and stuff in college and the whole thing, this one and that one and what about her?
No. So the reason we got here was the economics.
No. Look, they say that there was a guy like whatever they're talking about. It says like, look, if you finish college, you don't you're not using drugs, you don't commit any crimes, and you get married, you're going to be fine. You're going to be, and you have a fine. You're going to be fine.
Yeah, and all that's called they call it the success sequence.
Right.
Well, so that success sequence, which applies for men and women, actually, basically the same.
Yeah.
Which is graduate high school. It actually starts with really just graduating high school with at least a 3.0. If you graduate high school to 3.0, college actually drops as a value. Most people don't talk about this because we're so geared to college matters. Basically, kids that get 3.0s in high school, that should be our target.
Yeah.
Because once you get a 3.0 in high school, whatever education you get on the job, at community college, whatever, the likelihood is you're going to be doing B's and A's.
Yeah.
And even if it takes you 10 years to glue together your accounting degree, it doesn't matter. You're going to end up working in the financial control team at, Mondelez or wherever, and away you go, right? Like your life's going to be fine.
And it doesn't matter where you wind up or what you're doing.
Oh, wait, guys. I have to tell you something.
Yeah.
When I got out of college, I never did any drugs. I didn't drink. Well, when I was a little while.
You drank a little.
Yeah. But when I got into my, late 20s, 30s, I drank like everybody else.
Like everybody else.
Yeah. I didn't.
You date drank, basically.
Yeah. And I didn't drink any. I didn't drink any drugs. I didn't do it. Never did any drugs. I was, stable, nice guy, etc. And I have to then engaged 3 times. Never got married.
Yeah.
I said, the kind of woman who would stay with me. I was relatively stable. I'm in a nice, normal profession, the acting and writing profession.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no crazy people there.
Yeah.
All sarcasm intact.
Yes.
The thing is that the formula is always changing whenever you go.
I will say New York is hard, just like LA is.
Yeah.
Okay.
For a couple reasons. I think people overestimate the size of the market, but your size is governed by the small circumference that you can actually have good access to on a regular basis. Like in LA, if you live on the west side, I grew up on the east side. I grew up in basically downtown LA and Pasadena. That was where I grew up all the way through college. So that east side was mine. I had all my relatives over here. So I'd come over here to do stuff, but this wasn't my clique. And so those cliques out here are as extreme as East Queens and the Upper West Side. Like those two don't meet like ever. Right. And so
different
what
tribes.
happens? So exactly. So what happens is people say, "Oh, the New York dating market is 2 million single people." No, it's not. New York dating market is this cluster you live in, which might be down to tens of thousands of single people, which is still a good number. But if they're all acting in this optionality, then that number that's serious like you might be down to just a few hundred. And then that becomes hard in a dense area because you're running past each other and you don't wear a sign saying actually serious, nice single person looking for other single, nice single person. Like we don't wear a sign that says that. So now we have to have friction to figure that out. And usually people don't want to pay the cost of that friction, or it's very expensive.
When you're a teenager, and aside, and I mean, if you go to college, you have that community. But if you don't, when you're a teenager into your 20s in New York, at least in the old days, not so much anymore, you had your neighborhood.
That's right.
Your neighborhood was your New York. I mean, it goes back.
Well, and let's be blunt. That was your pipeline of fantasy partnering. That either your family, being brothers, sisters, older, or aunts, uncles, let's just say, were your sergeant majors, bringing you down to your real size of your appropriateness to that market. So maybe down the street there was Maria, the greatest ever, the hottest thing on earth, and you, because everyone thinks they're a solid grade higher than they really are, you thought you had a real shot, and your older sister or your aunt was like, yeah, you have zero shot. Like you need to fucking dial it to where you really are. So you had this internal governor management system, which you don't have anymore. Or, I mean, if you're lucky, you do, because you're, in the right family or the right kind of neighborhood or the right town, like fine. Like if you're in a smaller town, city, you probably have more of that. But if you're in one of these big cities, it's literally, it's Hunger Games. It's every person for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's why I've always argued, for the handful of people that are dead serious, you need to get out of these big metros for a while. You can come back, but you need to get out, because your chance, and even going to a mid-sized metro, Philadelphia, is radically different than in New York. And by the way, in Philly's a great town. My oldest daughter went to college there. That's where her husband to be went to school with her. And it's a great town. It's a great college town. It's a great culture town. But it's like having a third of Brooklyn. That's about as big as Philly is. And so it's about big enough that's a real city, but not massive. And it also doesn't have too many we're better than ourselves vibes, right? And so there's a very, and I think this is really important about a place like Philly, is there is a natural conveyor belt around Philly, the Delaware Valley area, the Eastern Pennsylvania, or the Jersey side, which is this sort of SpaceX of, pairings go to, right? Like, you meet in Philly, hang for 2 years, pop, meet, hang, pop, meet, hang. It's like it's like a trebuchet is launching couples to these 3 zones. And there's like a feedback loop here. And everyone usually stays within that striking distance of Philly. So even when they're together in Bucks County, they take the SEPA in, or they drive in to go to the museum or go to a game or whatever, right? Go out to eat. And so it has a more Columbus, Ohio vibe to it, right? More of that Ann Arbor kind ofness. And I think you just get much higher success rates in places like that than in New York or LA, Chicago. Or even San Francisco. San Francisco is a train wreck primarily because San Francisco itself is really the size of Manhattan. It's a small city. It's not even a big city. And then you've got the other 30 cities wrapped around it. And the logistics are like LA. And it's just, you're really like, if you're in San Carlos, you're not dating someone in Oakland or in Emeryville or whatever. Like that's impossible. Right. It's just like if you're in Brooklyn, you're not dating people in the Upper West Side.
Look, you're not going to want to. I mean, especially these days when everything's, time was slower.
Yep.
like 100 years ago or something.
Yep.
So say, okay, we'll communicate by mail, we'll send letters.
Yep.
And things like that. People had more time, more patience.
Or phone
Now-
calls. Remember the old play a game with the phone? I call, leave a message, you know,
Right.
but I got to be careful because remember, if I call and I leave a message